who are in this media space as well as organizations to work with these with certain principal capacities, and these principles include recognizing the oneness of humankind, the equality of men and women, and also investigation of truth. And there need to be certain approaches that we need to adopt. For instance, that the kind of work that we do needs to be rational. It needs to draw on all types of knowledge systems. So from academic theories to philosophies, through community experiences, as well as social realities.
Also, I would like to ask, how can media help strengthen the relationships between citizens, institutions, and communities based on the values of commitment like truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect? Because these are the essential pillars of collective life.
Right. So to build a collective right, these three actors, right, the citizens, the communities, and the institution need to work hand in hand. But someone has to initiate this. Media often is not very approachable. They often come to us when they want some kind of news and information from us. But there needs to be a strong idea of collaboration that needs to be fostered. Even today, the kind of news and information which we put out is based on certain particular news sources. They are not from the ground per se. So there's a need that the media practitioners also go to the field where where the people are, where communities are, understand what they're saying, and also the other way around. People need to be able to. No, I'll just continue from somewhere then. So there's a need for increased collaboration between citizens, communities, and the media institutions, which will only happen when all three of them work in synergy. And this requires various platforms, such as, for instance, the symposium. Also, it brings everybody together to ideate and to explore what kind of solutions are there to address these issues. Yeah.
Another question, how would media foster an environment wherein the process of consensus building around vital issues and principles, diversity of opinion is valued and fostered?
I think to foster an environment, firstly, it should be. I'm going to take a second. So, to foster an environment, we need to understand that there are various people. It's just not one person or one angle. There needs to be various thoughts and opinions which need to be taken into account. And this environment is only built when there's a certain level of trust, understanding, there's unity of thought and action, which we need to ensure is created while talking about issues of public concern. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll be asking questions from the concept of itself.
Sure.
It says, how are media organizations and professionals, how they resist certain negative influences and forces in the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
You have asked a very good question. See, that is the challenge today, and that is why we have organized this public discourse. The media houses and the media, professionals, actually everything is influenced by, various external factors, like you can understand the business houses are looking for revenue, the individuals are looking for certain other benefits and avenues from government and political bosses. So that is that is why they really create some negative forces in the society.
So how does media foster an environment where in the process of consensus building around vital issues and principles, how can diversity of opinion be valued and it can be fostered?
Again, very good question. It's very important for our country where there are a lot of caste, lot of groups, lot of views, and especially the poorest section of the society, the downtrodden society. Now their opinion should be expressed by the media, And what we are seeing is that since media is more dominant in cities and B towns, their opinion is being expressed, but people in the remote areas, their opinion is not being expressed. So what we have to do, of course, the things have improved a lot, but still lot need to be done by media houses in order to in order to represent the voice of those people.
How can media strengthen the relationship between citizens, organizations, and communities and institutions based on values like truthfulness, maybe rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, and trust? So that, because all of these are essential pillars of a collective life. So how can media strengthen this relationship?
Yes, very important. Again, see, media has a bigger role in this. See, if media is true to its profession, if media is true to its news, if media is true what they are showing to the public, whether it is print media or electronic media, I think that can really foster truthfulness, and the people will believe them, and also the youngsters will learn how to behave in the society in times to come. Moreover, media has specific role in community development, societal development, educational development. So all these things are extremely important. And again, one more thing, environmental development, sustainable development. So these are very important issues for the media to highlight.
Do you have any feedback to this?
Yes, it's a well organized, and moreover the people from different backgrounds spoke here, like professionals, academicians, and practitioners. So this kind of discourses really are good for the society at large, and if we can its final thing can be sent to media houses, sent to the government, probably things might improve little bit. That is my feeling. Thank you.
एक कर दो, एक खड़ा करो। अभी तो तैयार ही नहीं, हम क्या बोलना है मैडम?
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences and forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
Stand here, this side of the lens. मैं इधर हूँ, ये पोस्टर इधर है ना? So it's called looking room, ma'am. So if I'm on this side of the frame, if you stand here, I'm going to look out of the frame, and that won't look nice. Come closer to the lens. More. Okay, now ask the question.
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences and forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
So if media has to do its job, the focus has to be on the issue. It's not about negative forces, positive forces, it's about issues. And if there is an issue, then you focus on what the problem is and how you solve it, or what are the issues around that issue, who are the people, who are the different, aspects of the issue. So I don't think you have to be positive or negative, you just have to be straight up in addressing the issue. Your approach of not constantly pointing fingers is an important approach. The more important part of being a journalist is to address the problem itself, and I think negative, positive is just all part of it.
Another question is, how can media help strengthen the relationship between citizens, institutions, and communities based on the values of commitment to the truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, and trust? Because these are all essential pillars of collective life. So how can media help strengthen the relationship?
The main tenets of journalism is communication, which means you always have exchange of ideas. You put forth all the ideas of the community together, and then help people communicate with each other through it. So the job is in fostering a better communication setup, rather than keeping people segregated, having small islands of ideas not interacting with each other. The idea is to bring the confluence of the islands together so that they actually can have a consultative process in moving forward. So I think it's very aligned with good quality communication, and that's why journalism continues to play that role.
Do you have any feedback to this?
As long as it's not for on air. Yeah, you must research the people you're bringing. Research the people that you're bringing in cannot be highly biased, highly uneducated to deliver quality interaction for the students that come here.
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist and act upon the influences and forces of the society in performing their responsibilities?
Sorry, can you please read it again?
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences or forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities? So how do they resist media organizations?
See, I think there are no negative forces emanating from the society as far as media is concerned. The basic work of a media organization or a media professional is to bring out the contemporary issues in the public domain, investigate, process it, and present it in a usable, readable form. Now, the only pressures or the negative influences that comes are those people or those institutions that have some kind of personal interest deriving from those issues. They don't want those issues to come out. So maybe there could be political institutions or political personalities, but there I think the journalist has to put on priority his or her mandate as his or her conscience as a journalist whose responsibility is to bring out the truth, to bring about the information based on facts and present it in the public domain and let the people decide, interpret and make opinions based on it. Yeah.
Another question I have is, how can media help to strengthen the relationship between citizens, institutions and communities based on certain values of commitment like truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, trust, because all of these are essential pillars of a collective life. So how can media strengthen the relationship based on these pillars?
See, media is part of society. Media is not a separate entity. A journalist is working within the community, within the society itself. The only way to do it is to listen to the voice of the people, listen to the voice of the community, highlight their issues, highlight their problems, and make sure that the concerned institutions or the concerned departments in the government listen to those issues and act on them. So ultimately, the role of a journalist is to communicate the voice of the people through appropriate channels to the concerned authorities to make relevant decisions and take appropriate actions on it.
Do you have any feedback for the symposium?
I think the symposium are very well organized and we had diversity of thoughts today and a diversity of opinions as well. And but I think as we go ahead, there should be multiple platforms to be created because we want to have further discussion, further digging into the issues, because creating or fostering positive public discourse require much more consultative processes and discussions at maybe different platforms. So I think it should go ahead and organize more such symposiums in the future. Thank you.
questions from the concept of itself.
Sure.
It says, how are media organization and professionals, how they resist certain negative influences and forces in the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
You have asked a very good question. See, that is the challenge today, and that is why we have organized this public discourse. The media houses and the media, professionals, actually everything is influenced by, various external factors, like you can understand the business houses are looking for revenue, the individuals are looking for certain other benefits and avenues from government and political bosses. So that is, that is why they really create some negative forces in the society.
So how does media foster an environment where in the process of consensus building around vital issues and principles, how can diversity of opinion be valued and it can be fostered?
Again, very good question. It's very important for our country, where there are a lot of caste, lot of groups, lot of views, and especially the poorest section of the society, the downtrodden society. Now their opinion should be expressed by the media. And what we are seeing is that since media is more dominant in cities and B towns, their opinion is being expressed, but people in the remote areas, their opinion is not being expressed. So what we have to do, of course, the things have improved a lot, but still lot need to be done by media houses in order to the voice, in order to represent the voice of those people.
How can media strengthen the relationship between citizens, organizations, and the communities and institutions based on values like truthfulness, maybe rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, and trust? So that, because all of these are essential pillars of a collective life. So how can media strengthen this relationship?
Yes, very important. Again, see, media has a bigger role in this. See, if media is true to its profession, if media is true to its news, if media is true what they are showing to the public, whether it is print media or electronic media, I think that can really foster truthfulness, and the people will believe them, and also the youngsters will learn how to behave in the society in times to come. Moreover, media has specific role in community development, societal development, educational development. So all these things are extremely important. And again, one more thing, environmental development, sustainable development. So these are very important issues for the media to highlight.
Do you have any feedback to this?
Yes, it's a well organized, and moreover the people from different backgrounds spoke here, like professionals, academicians, and practitioners. So this kind of discourses really are good for the society at large, and if we can its final thing can be sent to media houses, sent to the government, probably things might improve little bit. That is my feeling. Thank you.
एक कर दो, एक खड़ा करो। अभी तो तैयार ही नहीं, हम क्या बोल रहे हैं, क्या बोलना है मैम?
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences and forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
Stand here, this side of the lens. मैं इधर हूँ, ये पोस्टर इधर है ना? So it's called looking room, ma'am. So if I'm on this side of the frame, if you stand here, I'm going to look out of the frame, and that won't look nice. Come closer to the lens. More. Okay, now ask the question.
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences and forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities?
So if media has to do its job, the focus has to be on the issue. It's not about negative forces, positive forces, it's about issues. And if there is an issue, then you focus on what the problem is and how you solve it, or what are the issues around that issue, who are the people, who are the different, aspects of the issue. So I don't think you have to be positive or negative. You just have to be straight up in addressing the issue. Your approach of not constantly pointing fingers is an important approach. The more important part of being a journalist is to address the problem itself, and I think negative, positive is just all part of it.
Another question is, how can media help strengthen the relationship between citizens, institutions and communities based on the values of commitment to the truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect and trust? Because these are all essential pillars of collective life. So how can media help strengthen the relationship?
The main tenets of journalism is communication, which means you always have exchange of ideas. You put forth all the ideas of the community together and then help people communicate with each other through it. So the job is in fostering a better communication setup rather than keeping people segregated, having small islands of ideas not interacting with each other. The idea is to bring the confluence of the islands together so that they actually can have a consultative process in moving forward. So I think it's very aligned with good quality communication, and that's why journalism continues to play that role.
Do you have any feedback with the
As long as it's not for on air. Yeah, you must research the people you're bringing. Research the people that you're bringing in cannot be highly biased, highly uneducated to deliver quality interaction for the students that come here.
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist and act upon the influences and forces of the society in performing their responsibilities?
Sorry, can you please read it again?
How are media organizations and professionals, how do they resist certain negative influences or forces of the society in performing their vital responsibilities? How do they resist it?
Yeah.
Media organizations.
See, I think there are no negative forces emanating from the society as far as media is concerned. The basic work of a media organization or a media professional is to bring out the contemporary issues in the public domain, investigate, process it and present it in a usable, readable form. Now the only pressures or the negative influences that comes are those people or those institutions that have some kind of personal interest deriving from those issues. They don't want those issues to come out. So maybe there could be political institutions or political personalities, but there I think the journalist has to put on priority his or her mandate as his or her conscience as a journalist whose responsibility is to bring out the truth, to bring about the information based on facts and present it in the public domain and let the people decide, interpret and make opinions based on it. Yeah.
Another question I have is, how can media help to strengthen the relationship between citizens, institutions and communities based on certain values of commitment like truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, trust, because all of these are essential pillars of a collective life. So how can media strengthen the relationship based on these pillars?
See, media is part of society. Media is not a separate entity. A journalist is working within the community, within the society itself. The only way to do it is to listen to the voice of the people, listen to the voice of the community, highlight their issues, highlight their problems, and make sure that the concerned institutions or the concerned departments in the government listen to those issues and act on them. So ultimately, the role of a journalist is to communicate the voice of the people through appropriate channels to the concerned authorities to make relevant decisions and take appropriate actions on it.
Do you have any feedback for the symposium?
I think the symposium are very well organized and we had diversity of thoughts today and a diversity of opinions as well. And but I think as we go ahead, there should be multiple platforms to be created because we want to have further discussion, further digging into the issues, because creating or fostering positive public discourse require much more consultative processes and discussions at maybe different platforms. So I think it should go ahead and organize more such symposiums in the future. Thank you.
Affairs of the Baha'is of India in collaboration with Ramanujan College, Delhi University. We will start our program with invocation. I would like to request Carmel to say a prayer.
मैं तेरी शरण में जाग उठा हूँ, हे मेरे ईश्वर, हे मेरे ईश्वर, जो तेरी शरण की कामना करे, उसके लिए उचित है कि वो तेरे संरक्षण में निवास करे, निवास करे। मेरे अंतर मन को भी हे मेरे नाथ, अपने धर्म प्रकाशन के प्रभात प्रकाश द्वारा वैसे ही आलोकित कर दे, जैसे तूने मेरे बाहक अस्तित्व को अपने कृपा के प्रभात प्रकाश द्वारा प्रकाशित किया है, प्रकाशित किया है। मैं तेरी शरण में जाग उठा हूँ।
We will now proceed to our inaugural session, and I would like to request Dr. S.P. Agarwal, Principal of Ramanujan College, Delhi University, to please address this session.
Good morning and welcome to all of you to this one-day symposium on role of the media in fostering constructive public discourse. Well, in the first session, basically, my role is very, very limited. I have to chair this session, and there are experts with us. They will be sharing their expert knowledge with all of you. Our friend, basically, institutional friend, chief guest today, Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, DG, Indian Institute of Mass Communication. He needs no introduction. Most of you know, but youngsters should know that he is heading an institution which is basically a unique institution in the area of mass media and one of the best in the country. Our guest, Professor Pramod Kumar, again Dean Student Welfare from IMC. He is basically from Urdu journalism. Our collaborator and long-time friend, Bhai House, and today Mrs. Nilakshi Rajkhova, Director, Bhai House, is representing Bhai House, and we are doing this conference jointly. And she is the main initiator of this discourse, or you can say the symposium. Our invited speakers, media personalities, my colleague, Dr. Nirmalya, Dr. Rolok, and various other young colleagues, participants, and lovely students. Once again, I welcome you on behalf of Ramanujan College, University of Delhi. Well, friends, most of you know it. Ramanujan College is a Delhi University maintained institution, and our focus is in the areas of mathematical sciences, social sciences, management and commerce, and recently the college got the highest grade A++, 3.71, highest in the country as well as in colleges of Delhi University. And we have ranking of NIRF 41 in the country. Though we are not directly offering courses in media, but our students are very keen to learn, the media courses, and we are offering certificate and diploma courses. And shortly, we might offer the degree courses in our college. And that is why we have involved a lot of youngsters for today's, discussion. Well, basically, all of you know that the media is the fourth pillar of democracy. I need not say much about it, but all of you know it. And if not, you must know it, especially youngsters, that without media, no democracy can flourish in the world. Media has a specific role in fostering what the legislature, judiciary, and executive is doing. Their role is to raise your voice, public voice in the forum. That is very important. And we have seen over the period, even during the COVID, or let me go a little back, since independence, when media had a very limited role, in the sense that most of the media was in the public sector. And when in 90s media was open to the private sector, whether it is electronic media or print media, let me tell you, there is a lot of growth, and your voice is being represented. But still more need to be done. Today, when we see that, in the TV debate, basically one person is calling few experts in the area, or maybe few public figures, or maybe few politicians, and doing a discussion, sometimes we feel that is not real. Anybody is speaking anything, but the main point is getting away. And another important thing is, we see that either media is pro-government or against government, rather than talking about the issues of the public. Of course, they are doing it. There is no doubt about it. But direction should be very specific, that their role is to highlight again and again if problem is not solved. That is important. Now, another important thing which, though I'm not an expert of media, but I know that more and more media, doing these kind of discussions and youngsters being involved, probably things will be much, much better. And role of educational institutions is very important, very, very important. Because, see, who brings the media people or correspondent, or the people who are working with either print media, electronic media, are the educational institutions. Of course, the IMC is a unique, but they cannot train everyone. Then there are universities. But all of you know that universities have limitations of its own, because they cannot give you much practical exposure. Most of the time, theory doesn't work. And you can see the best media people may not be trained in media at all. So it is their taste, interest, and learning by doing has made them the great, journalist or great media people. Now, another important thing, when we come back during the COVID, see, most of us sitting at home, everything is closed, but getting every information through media. Even their role was much more than any doctor, than any health facilities, or than any other, the COVID, so-called COVID people who were doing job for us. But some of us say that, if you watch too much media, then probably you are getting more and more information and becoming more and more gloomy that what is happening is also affecting your brain and psyche. Yes, that is true also. That is why sometimes even the best of the electronic media who runs news channels, they always say, don't watch, the news too much. Once in a while it is okay. But if you keep on watching and getting the repeated information, that creates problem. So that is very important, especially from young minds' point of view. But on the other hand, I'm not saying this in the sense that our youngsters have stopped reading the newspaper, which is a very bad situation. You must go through newspaper at least every morning, half an hour, 1 hour, whatever time, or you always carry your newspaper, whether in your area or any other area. Always, whenever you get time, just read it. Very important. I'm not talking about the electronic media. Of course, electronic media is giving you quick information. And then the social media. Now, problem, coming with this social media is, of course, it is a, game changer, whether in industry, commerce, or whether in any of the areas, which print and electronic media was there. But sometimes social media creates a lot of problems because there is no control over it. Anybody can say anything, and anybody can say, give any information, and you might believe and create problem in the society. So that is, you have to understand, being a young person, that do not just believe blindly any information on social media. So that is also very, very important. And another important thing is that, for the media people and for youngsters, that all the media and the young people must highlight, especially those who are doing the reporting, the main problems, the common problems of water, electricity, roads, sanitation, hygiene, health, education. Only then, government or the executive will work on that. Until it is highlighted, they will not be able to address those problems. Of course, everybody knows it, but still, sometimes highlighting again and again, make sure that it goes into it. Similarly, all of you know that new education policy 2020, from education point of view, they have also talked about the media in detail, because in NEP, interdisciplinarity is the key. And they said that people from history, people from literature, people from various, or maybe from science, people should opt for courses on media and must learn the basic philosophies of media courses, so that if you can adopt that as a career, or you can, understand what exactly is needed as a media, person, or what exactly, you should be able to interpret which information is right and which is wrong. So that is very, very important. And then, the skills of writing and speaking are also very important if you, look into the media courses. So with this, thank you very much. Thank you to all the dignitaries and panelists with me. And now I invite Ms. Nilakshi Rajkova to welcome and introduce the concept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Good morning, everyone. I would like to warmly welcome once again our distinguished speakers and participants to this symposium on the role of the media in fostering constructive public discourse. This is a joint initiative of Office of Public Affairs of the Baha'is of India and the Ramanujan College, University of Delhi. We are really grateful to Ramanujan College, to Dr. Agarwal for supporting us in organizing this symposium today. This symposium is being organized to open up a space to explore how media can contribute to societal harmony and stimulate thoughtful conversations on issues facing humanity. I think Dr. Agarwal has also addressed many of these crises that humanity is facing today. The challenges that we are facing today indicate the need for a fundamental transformation in the way we live together in an increasingly interdependent world. So among other things, we need to develop more thoughtful and mature modes of public discourse so that we can deliberate collectively on the exigencies of the age and the means for addressing them. So one of the factors we need to consider is the role of the media in shaping public discourse, because the vibrancy and constructiveness of public discourse can be taken as a vital measure of the democratic health of a society. It provides the space for rich dialogue, where through the exchange of different opinions, citizens reach a consensus on their collective vision for a better society, and they renew their commitment to the moral principles underlying this vision. It is through the vibrant interchange of ideas that innovation and creativity are nourished, and the horizons of thought are constantly expanded. Within the spaces where such discourse happens, members of society and its institutions deliberate on and give direction to public policies on a range of issues. Not only does the healthy back and forth among citizens and between them and the institutions of society ensure the decisions and policies affecting the common weal benefit from the most thorough and thoughtful consideration, this process also builds bridges of mutual understanding between citizens, institutions, and communities, which is vital for strengthening the trust and good faith needed to collaborate on common goals. Dr. Agarwal has also mentioned about this mass media and the role of the social media that are affecting in our life. The institutions of the mass media have a central role to play in the quality and richness of public discourse in our society. They provide citizens with reliable information on matters of concern to the public good. They help frame issues in ways that highlight their relevance for the citizens and the implications of normative frameworks to the issues at hand. They play a crucial role in placing before the public the issues that should be prioritized. Further, they also provide a dialectical space where policymakers and experts can communicate and deliberate on crucial issues with citizens, and where the voices of citizens, their concerns and priorities, especially those who are economically or socially marginalized, can be heard and acknowledged in decision-making processes. While the mass media is not the only public institution responsible for the quality and integrity of public discourse, it plays a consequential role in shaping discourse by the way it presents the facts, frames them in ways that are compelling and meaningful for the citizen, prioritizes what matters the most, and ensures the representation of diverse voices and perspectives in deliberation on a subject pertaining to the common good. The past decade has witnessed a grave deterioration of the quality of public discourse in India and across the world. The possibility of changing with fellow citizens and the other stakeholders in society in constructive discourse based on good faith and mutual respect has become increasingly difficult in an atmosphere of extreme polarization and partisanship. The rampant spread of disinformation and the emphasis on distracting agendas unrelating to the real issues that pertain to collective well-being have dissipated, divided, and dispersed the collective focus needed to address and find meaningful solutions to the challenges facing society. In the effort to revive, rehabilitate, and restore trust, civility, and constructiveness to public discourse in India, the mass media has a vital role to play. Now more than ever, society needs the mainstream media to perform its functions as a just and unbiased reporter of the facts, as a trustworthy guide to public opinion towards the issues that pertain to the common good, and as an enabler of constructive and consultative dialogue between the various stakeholders in the well-being of society. In performing its responsibilities to the public, the media faces immense obstacles today, including political and economic interests that curtail its freedom and compromise its integrity, and the pressures of functioning within the force filled of disinformation and polarization created by social media, as Dr. Agarwal has also mentioned. That the question remains, how are media organizations and professionals to resist these influences and forces in seeking to perform their vital responsibilities to society? How does the media not only truthfully reflect the conditions of society, but also foster constructive and harmonious yet critical dialogue on these conditions that would provide a foundation for public policy while strengthening good faith and trust between citizens, institutions, and communities? How would media foster an environment where, in the process of consensus building around vital issues and principles, diversity of opinions is valued and fostered? How can media help strengthen the relationship between citizens, institutions, and communities based on the values of commitment to the truth, rationality, justice, collaboration, mutual respect, and trust that are the essential pillars of collective life? So friends, we look forward to the deliberations and the reflections of the distinguished speakers that are present here today on this very important theme and these questions that has been raised in the background note. And we look forward to their presentations. Thank you.
All right, friends. Now, we will invite Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, who will be speaking to us as a keynote speaker and, initiate the basic discussion on the topic. Before I invite him, let me briefly introduce Professor Sanjay Dwivedi. He is not only the director IMC New Delhi, but a well-known Indian journalist, editor, writer, columnist, media guru, academic administrator, and communication expert. During his journalism career spanning over a decade and a half, he has been associated with various notable media organizations, including Dainik Bhaskar, Hari Bhumi, Nav Bharat, Swadesh, and InfoIndia.com. He was an integral part of the launch team of Chhattisgarh's first satellite channel, G24 Ghante Chhattisgarh. G24 Ghante Chhattisgarh. He has served as the Vice Chancellor and Registrar of Makhanlal Chaturvedi National University of Journalism and Communication, Bhopal. This was after a successful tenure of 10 years as HOD Department of Mass Communication at the same university. Professor Dwivedi was among the founding members of Department of Journalism at Raipur's Khushbu Thakre Journalism and Mass Communication University and was the first head of the department. He is currently a member of the Governing Council and Society of the Film and Television Institute of India, Pune. He is also the member of Board of Studies at Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya Wardha, Vikram University Ujjain, Maulana Azad National Urdu University Hyderabad, and Assam University Silchar. Professor Dwivedi is an avid writer, and over 3,000 pieces penned by him on political, social, and media subjects have been published in major national newspapers and publications. He has authored and edited 32 books. He is the chief editor, communicator, and Sanchar Madhyam University UGC approved research journal. Professor Dwivedi is also the chief editor of Rajya Bhasha, Vimarsh, and Sanchar Srijan, and honorary consultant editor of Media Vimarsh Quarterly. He has been conferred with various awards for his remarkable contributions to the media industry. Thank you, sir. Please welcome and
थैंक यू प्रोफेसर अग्रवाल सर। आज के इस कार्यक्रम में मुझे बुलाने के लिए आदरणीय नीलाक्षी राज खोवा जी, उनका धन्यवाद। कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित प्रोफेसर प्रमोद कुमार जी, डीन स्टूडेंट वेलफेयर IIMC, मेरे दोस्त इंदौर से आए हुए डॉक्टर फाजिल, उनको देख के थोड़ी मेरी हिम्मत बढ़ी, कोई मध्य प्रदेश वाला भी यहाँ पे है। श्री रोहित गांधी जी, एडिटर इन चीफ डेमोक्रेसी न्यूज़ लाइव, राव नरेंद्र यादव जी, आदरणीय प्रोफेसर विनीता गुप्ता जी, एकता सावंत जी, और इस कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित प्यारे विद्यार्थियों और भाई को मानने वाले सभी दोस्तों, तीसरी बार मुझे यहाँ पे आने का मौका मिला है। 2 बार तो मैं नीलाक्षी जी की मौजूदगी में आया, एक बार उनकी गैरहाजिरी में आया कि देखो यहाँ चल क्या रहा है। और मुझे यहाँ आके बहुत हमेशा खुशी मिलती है कि एक ऐसी संस्था, एक ऐसा मिशन जो पूरी दुनिया के बारे में बात करता है, सिर्फ भारत के बारे में बात नहीं करता, और पूरी मानवता के कल्याण की बात करता है, सबको साथ लेकर चलने की बात करता है, और जिससे दुनिया सुंदर बन सकती है, जिससे दुनिया और बेहतर बन सकती है, जिससे दुनिया और खूबसूरत बन सकती है, उस मिशन पे काम करता है। तो इसलिए मैं आदरणीय मैडम राज खोवा जी और इनके सभी जो साथी इस काम में लगे हुए हैं, इस मिशन में लगे हुए हैं और एक पवित्र संदेश को लोगों तक पहुंचाना चाहते हैं, उसके लिए मैं आप सबका अभिनंदन करता हूं। आदरणीय डॉक्टर SP अग्रवाल सर, जिनके सिर्फ जो है दर्शन मुझे ऑनलाइन ही होते हैं, आज पहली बार उनको इस तरह यहाँ पा करके मुझे अत्यंत खुशी की अनुभूति हो रही है। जाते समय आपको छू के भी जाऊँगा, क्योंकि किसी व्यक्ति को ऑनलाइन देखते रहना, उसको सुनते रहना और उसको छू के देखना, महसूस करके देखना, उसमें बड़ा अंतर होता है। पर हालात ऐसे थे, जब मैं आया दिल्ली तो मेरे साथ साथ कोरोना भी आया, तो इसलिए मिलना जुलना उस तरह से हो नहीं पाया जैसा होना चाहिए। और इंसान की फितरत ये है कि वो ऑनलाइन रह नहीं सकता। और आपने देखा कि पहाड़ों पे कैसा जाम लगा हुआ है, किस तरह गाड़ियां आपस में ठका ठक ठक रही हैं, होटलों में जगह नहीं है, लैंडस्लाइड हो रही है पर जनता जा रही है, क्योंकि उसका ये कहना कि भाई घर में रहने से अच्छा है कि पहाड़ पे मरे। देवताओं की भूमि है, देवभूमि होती पहाड़, जहाँ देवताओं ही बसते सारे, तो लोग निकल पड़े। और जब अभी कार्मल मैडम यहाँ प्रार्थना कर रही थी कि मैं तेरी शरण में जाग उठा हूँ, यही पढ़ा ना शायद, मैं तेरी शरण में जाग उठा हूँ, तो मैं भी आपकी शरण में आके थोड़ा जागा सा अनुभव कर रहा हूँ। क्योंकि आज मुझे यहाँ आना था तो मैं बहुत देर तक सोया, आमतौर पे मैं 6 बजे तक जग जाता हूँ, पर आज मेरी नींद 8 बजे खुली। ये किस लिए खुली? क्योंकि यहाँ मुझे जागना था, इसलिए वो लेट में खुली। तो मैं अपना बहुत ही सौभाग्य मानता हूँ कि आपने मुझे इस जगह आने और कुछ बातें कहने का मौका दिया। एक तो आजकल मीडिया क्या है ये बताना बड़ा मुश्किल हो गया है, क्योंकि मीडिया से ज़्यादा हो गया है। पहले एक लिमिटेड मीडिया था जो प्रशिक्षित लोग चलाते थे, कंट्रोल्ड मीडिया था जिसको कह सकते हैं, जिसमें एडिटर थे, रिपोर्टर्स थे, चीजें प्रोसेस होकर लोगों तक पहुंचती थी। आज के मीडिया में प्रोसेसिंग की संभावना शून्य होती जा रही, कम होती जा रही है। इसलिए दो वर्ड्स हमारे सामने आते हैं। एक शब्द है न्यूज, प्रमोद भाई, एक है न्यूज, दूसरी इंफॉर्मेशन। न्यूज जब आती थी आलोक भाई तो प्रोसेस होके आती थी। कोई रिपोर्टर होता तो न्यूज फाइल करता था, जो ट्रेंड होता था न्यूज के बिजनेस में, एडिटर उसको सब करता था, सब एडिटर उसकी सबिंग करता, फिर एडिटर उसको देखता था। कई प्रोसेस के बाद वो खबर लोगों तक जा पाती थी। आज इंफॉर्मेशन का टाइम है। जिसके मन में आया उसने कुत्ता काट के खाया। जगीरा डाकू कहता है चाइना गेट फिल्म में, नीलाक्षी मैडम आप हिंदी फिल्में देखती नहीं, देखा करो थोड़ा सा। जगीरा डाकू है, चाइना गेट एक फिल्म है, उसमें कहता मेरे मन को भाया, मैंने कुत्ता काट के खाया। तो ऐसे ही आजकल न्यूज के साथ हो रहा है। न्यूज प्रोसेस होके नहीं जा रही है। न्यूज को बिना प्रोसेस किए देने वाले लोग भी पत्रकार बन बैठे हैं। उनसे मैंने कहा भैया आपका क्या मतलब खबर से? बोले नहीं मैं तो मीडिया एक्टिविस्ट हूं। अरे हमने कहा यार एक्टिविस्टों से पूरा देश तबाह है, तुम भी आ गए इधर। बोले मीडिया एक्टिविस्ट। हमने ये क्या होता भाई? ये नई प्रजाति पैदा हुई है। जो है तो एक्टिविस्ट, उन्होंने खोल ओढ़ रखी जर्नलिस्ट की, और वे पूरे समाज में प्रदूषण पैदा कर रहे हैं क्योंकि सोशल मीडिया का एक मुक्त मंच उनको मिल गया। अब सोशल मीडिया पे जो बकवास की जा रही है या अच्छी बातें भी कही जा रही हैं, उसका जर्नलिज्म से कोई लेना देना नहीं है। जिस मेन स्ट्रीम जर्नलिज्म की बात आदरणीय मैडम कह रही थी, वो मेन स्ट्रीम जर्नलिज्म किससे लेना देना क्या है? मैंने जो भी खबर विदाउट प्रोसेस दी जा रही है, जो इन्फॉर्मेशन विदाउट प्रोसेस दी जा रही है, वो इन्फॉर्मेशन ही है। इसलिए इन्फॉर्मेशन और खबर के अंतर को हमको समझना पड़ेगा। न्यूज़ वो है जिसके साथ एक जिम्मेदारी है, जिसके साथ एक प्रोसेसिंग है, एडिटिंग है और एक जिम्मेदारी जुड़ी हुई है, रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जुड़ी हुई है। वो न्यूज़ या खबर या समाचार कह सकते हैं आप उसको। पर इन्फॉर्मेशंस को हम समाचार मानने की गलती न करें। इन्फॉर्मेशन कोई भी दे सकता है। इसलिए इस समय में जब सोशल मीडिया इतना प्रभावशाली हो गया है, उस समय इन्फॉर्मेशन देने वालों ने अपने आप को जर्नलिस्ट कहना शुरू कर दिया है, जबकि वो जर्नलिस्ट नहीं है। जैसे एक मुखबिर है, वो भी खबर देता है, पर वो पुलिस वाला नहीं है। मुखबिर को मैं ना सस्पेंड कर सकता हूँ, ना टर्मिनेट कर सकता हूँ, कुछ नहीं कर सकता। वो तो कहीं से फ़ोन पे पुलिस वाले बताता है साहब इस गली से रेड शर्ट पहन करके संजय द्विवेदी नाम का एक आदमी जो लाल फूल लिए खड़ा है और उसकी उस अटैची में एक कार्बाइन है, पर वो पुलिस वाला नहीं है। पुलिस वाले को मैं सस्पेंड कर सकता हूँ, टर्मिनेट कर सकता हूँ, उसको 10 तरह की धाराओं में अंदर करवा सकता हूँ, उसकी वर्दी उतरवा सकता हूँ। मुखबिर का मैं क्या करूँगा? तो अभी जो हमारा पूरा पब्लिक डिस्कोर्स है, जिसके बारे में हम आज यहाँ चिंता व्यक्त करने के लिए बैठे हुए हैं, उस पूरे पब्लिक डिस्कोर्स पर कब्जा नॉन जर्नलिस्ट का है। जो जर्नलिस्ट नहीं है, जिनकी अथॉरिटी नहीं है खबर देने की, जिनकी ट्रेनिंग नहीं खबर देने की, वे हमें खबरें प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं और उसकी जिम्मेदारी हम जर्नलिस्ट को गाली दे रहे हैं कि जर्नलिस्ट ने ऐसा कर दिया, पत्रकार। अरे पत्रकार कहाँ कर रहा है भाई? उसकी सुन कौन रहा है? ये जनरेशन आई हुई है सुबह सुबह, हमारे प्यारे प्यारे बच्चे जो नया भारत बनाने वाले हैं। ये अखबार इसमें कौन पढ़ करके आया है? आप बताइए। हमें तो उम्मीद है कि अगर अच्छे बच्चे होंगे तो अखबार नहीं पढ़ते होंगे। तो जब अखबार पढ़ता नहीं है, टेलीविज़न देखता नहीं, तो बच्चा बिगड़ेगा कैसे? लोग कह रहे हैं मीडिया से बच्चा बिगड़ रहा है। अरे बच्चा अखबार पढ़ते ही नहीं है, टीवी देखता नहीं, अखबार पढ़ता नहीं, बिगड़ कैसे जाएगा हमारे बिगाड़ने से? हम तो कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अखबार पलट ले भाई। ना पढ़ना तो पलट तो ले, कम से कम पलटने को भी तैयार नहीं है। मैंने अच्छे अच्छे घरों में देखा 5-5, 7-7 अखबार आते हैं स्टेटस सिंबल के नाते, पर अखबार पलटे नहीं जाते। जिस दौर में अखबार पलटे नहीं जा रहे हैं, टेलीविज़न देखे नहीं जा रहे हैं, उस दौर में बच्चा बिगड़ जा रहा है मीडिया से। अरे भाई गजब की बात है। बिगड़ रहा होगा या बन भी रहा होगा, उसको जो भी बना रहा है वो सोशल मीडिया बना बिगाड़ रहा है। ध्यान रखिए आप। ये जो मोबाइल नाम की एक जादू की पुड़िया आपके हाथ में आई है, अलादीन का चिराग है, इस पे घिसता है, इसी पे रेडियो देखता है, इसी पे कुछ कंटेंट देखता होगा, कुछ वीडियो कंटेंट देखता होगा, कुछ वेबसाइट को सर्च करता होगा, पर अखबार नहीं पढ़ता भाई। ये हिंदुस्तान का नौजवान है, उसको इस भारत को आर्थिक महासत्ता बनाना, अखबार पढ़ेगा? टाइम खराब करेगा अपना, नहीं पढ़ता। तो मेरा ये मानना है कि जो इस तरह का जो कंटेंट जनरेट हो रहा है, और विनीता मैडम मैंने एक रिसर्च पढ़ी, उसमें बताया गया कि इतनी ज़्यादा चीज़ें रोज़ जो है वक्त जो गुजार रहे हैं इस पर सोशल मीडिया पे, अगर जितने लोग हैं पूरी दुनिया में सबका वक्त जोड़ दिया जाए सोशल मीडिया बिताने का, तो 10 लाख साल के बराबर हर दिन हम जाया कर रहे हैं। 10 लाख साल के बराबर। ये 10 लाख साल के बराबर जो वक्त सोशल मीडिया पे जाया किया जा रहा है, वह अन्यान्य तरीके से कुछ ना कुछ तो लोग कह रहे होंगे, नहीं अगर लिख रहे होंगे तो रिएक्ट कर रहे होंगे, कॉपी करके पेस्ट कर रहे होंगे। तो आप सोचिए कि कितना माल रोज तैयार हो रहा है, उसका मुकाबला रेगुलर मीडिया क्या करेगा? नहीं कर सकता। और इस नाते थोड़ा सा रहम करने की ज़रूरत है मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया के लोगों पे ऊपर, जो बेचारे कहना तो चाहते हैं पर लोग सुनने को बहुत तैयार नहीं है। ज़्यादातर जो मीडिया की आलोचना होती है वो टीवी देख के होती है, जो देखा नहीं जाता। आप ज़रा सर्वे देखिए कि न्यूज़ चैनल्स कितने देखे जाते हैं। आप देखेंगे कि बिल्कुल तली पे है, थोड़ा बहुत इंटरटेनमेंट के चैनल लोग देखते होते हैं, पर न्यूज़ चैनल बहुत कम देखे जाते हैं। न्यूज़ चैनल इस देश में विमर्श बनाने के माध्यम नहीं बचे, ये ध्यान रखिए आप। टेलीविज़न की अपनी मजबूरी है अग्रवाल साहब, उनको थोड़ा ड्रामा क्रिएट करना पड़ता है, और वो ड्रामा नहीं क्रिएट करेंगे तो उन पे कौन टिकेगा? अगर बड़ी सीरियस न्यूज़ पे चले जाए तो उनको देखेगा कौन? हमारे संस्थान का बहुत अच्छा चैनल है डीडी न्यूज़, खबर ही खबर है। कितने खबर के पिपासु उस पे जाते हैं, ज़रा बताइए मेरे को। मतलब आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि अल्टरनेट नहीं है। संसद का टेलीविज़न है, दिन भर डिस्कोर्स चलाता है, पेवर खबरें चलाता है, कितने लोग देख रहे हैं। मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया में भी बहुत सारे जर्नलिस्ट इस समय अपने पोर्टल्स वेबसाइट चला रहे हैं, बिल्कुल सीरियस न्यूज़ पे रहते हैं, बिल्कुल खबर पे रहते हैं, डिस्कोर्स पे रहते हैं। कौन देख रहा है, कौन जा रहा है उस पर? उनको कितने जतन करने पड़ते हैं अपने ऊपर लोगों को लाने के लिए। तो ये कहीं ना कहीं हमको देखना पड़ेगा कि हमने कैसा समाज बनाया है जो गंभीर विमर्शों पर, गंभीर खबरों पर जाना ही नहीं चाहता और हम उसकी आलोचना भी करना चाहते हैं। हम जिन चीज़ों को देखते हैं या देखते रहना चाहते हैं, उन्हीं चीज़ों के हम सबसे बड़े आलोचक हैं। हमारे एक मित्र थे, काफ़ी पहले 10 साल पहले रायपुर में एक सेमिनार में उन्होंने कहा मेरा बस चले तो मैं एकता कपूर को देश निकाला दे दूं। और मैंने देखा कि घर पर बैठ के वो एकता कपूर के ही सास कभी बहू और क्या क्या देखते रहते थे। तो ये जो पाखंड है कि मैं करूंगा पर बोलूंगा कुछ और, मेरी देखने की, मेरे व्यवहार करने की आदतें कुछ और हैं। मैं दिन में 12 घंटे जो है ऑनलाइन रहता हूं अपने मोबाइल पर और कहूंगा कि मोबाइल से बच्चे बिगड़ रहे हैं। अरे भाई पापा पहले आप तो सुधर जाओ, दादाजी पहले आप तो मोबाइल बंद करो, बच्चे को ज्ञान दे रहे हो। नहीं सुधरेगा बच्चा। आप कह रहे आप उस पर डिस्कोर्स पे जाइए, आप बुक्स पे जाइए, आप ओरिजिनल टेक्स्ट को पढ़िए, टेक्स्ट पे जाइए, लाइब्रेरी जाइए। आप गए आखिरी बार कब? आखिरी बार आपने कौन सी किताब पढ़ी? आखिरी बार आपने कौन सा अखबार पलटा या पूरा पढ़ा, या कौन सा एडिट पेज पे कौन सा आर्टिकल पढ़ के आप डिस्कशन किया? तो ये भी एक चीज़ है कि सोसाइटी में खबरों को कंज्यूम करने का तरीका बदल गया। लोग जहाँ से सीखते हैं वैसे ही बनते हैं, ये ध्यान रखिए आप। जब सोशल मीडिया हमारी जानकारियों का प्रथम सोर्स हो जाएगा, जब सोशल मीडिया हमारी जानकारी का पहली खिड़की हो जाएगी, हमारे पास हड़बड़ी वाले विचार आएंगे, हमारे पास गड़बड़ी वाली आदतें आएंगी और हम हमेशा हड़बड़ी में गड़बड़ी करने के लिए तैयार रहेंगे। इसको आप ध्यान रखिए। आपका सोर्स ही गलत है, जहाँ से आप खबर ले रहे हैं वो जगह ही गलत है, उस जगह से आप अच्छे विचार नहीं ले सकते। इसीलिए मेडिटेशन की सलाहें दी जा रही हैं, इसीलिए आंखें बंद करके कुछ वक्त अपने को देने के लिए सलाह दी जा रही है कि थोड़ा कंसंट्रेशन लेवल बढ़ाइए। उचक उचक के मतलब सर्वे आ रहे हैं कि 111 बार आदमी स्टेटस चेक कर रहा है। मुझे सर्वे पर भी भरोसा नहीं है, 111 बार नहीं चेक करता होगा, उससे ज़्यादा करता होगा। ये तो न्यूनतम है, क्योंकि वो औसत निकालते हैं। जिन लोगों से मिले होंगे वो बहाई वाले लोग होंगे, वो उनको प्रार्थना पूजा से फुर्सत नहीं है, तो वो क्या मोबाइल देखेंगे बेचारे। तो उन्हें नहीं देखा होगा वो 111 बार वाला सर्वे। मैं तो नहीं मानता कि इतना कम देखते होंगे, सवाल ही नहीं उठता। क्योंकि मैं तो देखता हूँ इतनी आज्ञाकारी पीढ़ी हिंदुस्तान में, राजखोआ मैडम कहीं पैदा नहीं हुई। आज्ञाकारी मतलब बिल्कुल डिवोट, इतने डिवोटी हैं, सिर नहीं उठाते। रिश्तेदार आ जाए, मामा आ जाए, ताऊ आ जाए, कोई भी आ जाए, वो घर में ऐसे बैठे रहते हैं। तो ऐसी पीढ़ी तो भगवान राम के ज़माने में भी नहीं थी कि लोग सिर झुकाए। और मैं आपसे कहता हूँ, और यही हालात रहे आने वाली जनरेशन में, जो आपके बच्चे पैदा होंगे ऐसे ही पैदा होंगे। क्योंकि देखिए धीरे धीरे हम मेहनत के काम कम करने लगे, धीरे धीरे में साइज कम हो गई, सब कम हो गया। तो जब 24 घंटे हमारा सिर झुका हुआ है, तो आने वाली जनरेशन से आप उम्मीद करें को ऐसे पैदा होंगे राणा प्रताप की तरह, संभव नहीं है। वो सिर झुका के पैदा होंगे, बड़े अदब से लोगों के साथ पेश आएंगे। तो ये आप इसको जनरेशन शिफ्ट कह लीजिए, कम्युनिकेशन शिफ्ट कह लीजिए, पर शिफ्ट तो हो गया है। हम किसी धोखे में नहीं है मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया के लोग कि हमारे कहने से जैसे एक ज़माने में मुर्गा बांग देता था तो सवेरा होता था, अखबार पढ़ते थे तो जानते थे शहर में क्या हुआ, टेलीविज़न देख के शाम को 8 बजे का बुलेटिन हमें पता चलता क्या हुआ। अब वो ज़माना चला गया। 24 घंटे 24/7 की दुकानें खुली हुई हैं, अखंड ज्ञान दे रही हैं, हर चीज़ पर नहीं रिएक्ट करना उस पर भी रिएक्ट कर रहे हैं, और रिएक्ट करते 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 झगड़े पे तब्दील हो जाती चीज़ें। तो इसको आप देखना पड़ेगा कि पूरा पब्लिक डिस्कोर्स बहुत बिगड़ा हुआ है। ऐसे में हमें मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया के साथ साथ हमें जो सोशल मीडिया पे जो फौज है उसको भी, समाज को भी ट्रेंड करने की ज़रूरत है। इसीलिए विषय निकल के आया प्रमोद भाई, मीडिया लिटरेसी। इसीलिए विषय निकल के आया कि हम मीडिया के इस्तेमाल करने वाले उपभोक्ता तो हैं, पर हम क्या मीडिया लिटरेट भी हैं? आपके पास एप्पल का मोबाइल होने का मतलब नहीं कि आप मोबाइल को जानते हैं। मैं यहाँ ज्ञान दे रहा हूँ, मेरा मोबाइल बंद पड़ा है और मैं मानता हूँ कि मेरा मोबाइल कुछ नहीं सुन रहा है, सब सुन रहा है। उसने मेरे फुटप्रिंट्स कवर किए हैं। मैं जेएनयू से यहाँ निकला हूँ, मेरे फुटप्रिंट्स कवर है मैं किस रास्ते पे जा रहा हूँ। मैं पूरे देश में घूमता हूँ, मेरे फुटप्रिंट्स आते हैं उस पर। मैं बड़ा होशियार बनता रहूँ कि मैं बड़े स्मार्ट हूँ और मैं बड़ा मीडिया लिटरेट हूँ, कुछ नहीं जानते। अपने मोबाइल के बारे में आप नहीं जानते, खुद पे आप क्या जानोगे? इसलिए माध्यमों की ताकत को समझने की ज़रूरत है। ये इस बदले हुए समय में हमें मीडिया लिटरेट लोगों को बनाने की ज़रूरत है। हमारे सीबीएसई के दोस्तों ने कोर्स चालू किया 10+2 में, उसमें मीडिया पढ़ाएंगे। मुझे लगता है कि मीडिया पढ़ाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है कि आप उनको खबर लिखना सिखाओ, उनको फीचर लिखना सिखाओ, मीडिया कैसे वर्क करता है उनको सिखाओ। उनको ये सिखाओ कि मीडिया का इस्तेमाल कैसे करो बच्चों को, क्योंकि इसके नाते जो अराजकता पैदा हो रही है, जो फैमिली लाइफ खराब हो रही है, उनकी आंखें खराब हो रही हैं, उन पर उनके तमाम तरह की दूसरी बीमारियां पैदा हो रही हैं, उस पर जोर देने की ज़रूरत है। हम लोगों ने 40 के बाद ये धारण किया, आप कब धारण करेंगे, आने वाली जनरेशन कितनी जल्दी इसको पहन लेगी, इस पर आप नहीं कह सकते। ये उंगलियां जो आप इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं ये ऐसी की ऐसी बचेंगे क्या? तो ये भी चीज़ है कि हम किसी चीज़ के जो हैबिचुअल हो जाते हैं, उसकी आदत के शिकार हो जाते हैं और वहीं को हम पहला सोर्स मान करके चीज़ें ग्रहण करना शुरू कर देते हैं और दोष देते हैं जर्नलिस्ट को, दोष देते हैं मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया को। मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया में बड़ी जिम्मेदारी से कहना चाहता हूँ आलोक भाई कि आज भी बहुत जिम्मेदारी से हम लोग काम करते हैं, बहुत जिम्मेदारी से काम करते हैं, क्योंकि हमें पकड़ लिया जाता है। हम जिस प्लेटफॉर्म पे हैं वो क्रेडिबिलिटी पे चलता है, वो सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी पे चलता है, उस पर हम धमाल नहीं मचा सकते, उस पर हमारी एक लिमिटेशंस है। आप देखते होंगे बड़े से बड़ा जर्नलिस्ट ट्रोल हो जाता है, बड़े से बड़ा जर्नलिस्ट ट्रोल हो जाता है। क्यों? क्योंकि लोगों के पास आज प्रतिक्रिया करने की जगह उपलब्ध है। इसलिए हमें न्यूज़ और मैंने आपसे कहा कि इन्फॉर्मेशन, इसके बाजार के अंतर को समझना पड़ेगा। न्यूज़ के खिलाड़ी बहुत कम हैं, इन्फॉर्मेशन के खिलाड़ी बहुत ज़्यादा हैं, वो बाजार में उतरे हुए हैं, जो न्यूज़ की शकल में, जर्नलिस्ट की शकल में अपना एक्टिविज्म, अपना विचार या अपनी विचारधारा को हम पे आरोपित करना चाहते हैं और माहौल को गंदा बनाना चाहते हैं। दूसरी बात है कि सोशल मीडिया पे जो कुछ भी लिखा जा रहा है उसका मेन स्ट्रीम जर्नलिज्म से कोई लेना देना नहीं है। कृपया सोशल मीडिया पे हो रही धमाल को हमारे जिम्मे मत डालिए। तीसरा निवेदन मेरा ये है कि पूरी दुनिया के अंदर, मैं अभी प्रमोद भाई से बात कर रहा था कि झगड़ा किस बात का है? झगड़ा श्रेष्ठता का, कि मेरा विचार ही सर्वश्रेष्ठ है, मैं सर्वश्रेष्ठ हूं, मेरा विचार सर्वश्रेष्ठ है, और इसके नाते पूरी दुनिया में खून बहता है, रक्तपात होता है, क्योंकि हमें स्वीकार्यता नहीं है दूसरे विचार की, हमें सिखाया नहीं गया। आप सिखाते हो, आप सिखाते हो, इसलिए मैं आपके मंच पे आया हूं। और जब तक ये श्रेष्ठता का विचार रहेगा तब तक दुनिया में संघर्ष, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बनते रहेंगे, आप इसको रोक नहीं सकते। मैं बड़ी जिम्मेदारी के साथ कहना चाहता हूं, हम सर्वश्रेष्ठ हैं, ये कहां का विचार है? ये संभव ही नहीं है, अंतिम कृति बनी नहीं है। आप समझ लीजिए, कोई भी ईश्वर ने आखिरी चीज नहीं बनी, वो हर दिन नया क्रिएशन करता है, हर दिन नया सूरज निकलता है, हर दिन नए विचार हमको ग्रहण करने होते हैं। इसलिए हमारे ग्रंथ कहते हैं आनो भद्रा कर्तव्य यंत्र विश्वता, हमें चारों दिशाओं से कल्याणकारी विचार प्राप्त हों। हमने खिड़कियां दरवाजे बंद करके नहीं रखे हैं, हमें तो जो भी अच्छी बात कहेगा, अच्छे विचार हमें देगा, लोक मंगल की बात करेगा, उसके साथ खड़े हो जाएंगे। इसलिए हम आज भाई के साथ खड़े हैं, क्योंकि अच्छी बात कह रहे हैं, दुनिया के सुमंगल का विचार कर रहे हैं, लोक मंगल की बात कर रहे हैं, लोगों के कल्याण की बात कर रहे हैं, विश्व में सुख शांति हो, लोग एक दूसरे को स्वीकार करें, इसकी बात कह रहे हैं। और इसलिए दो अंग्रेजी के शब्द हैं रोहित भाई, दो शब्द हैं, एक है टॉलरेंस, एक है एक्सेप्टेंस। हम टॉलरेंस वाले लोग नहीं हैं, हम आपको बर्दाश्त नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम आपको एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं। आप जैसे भी हैं, प्रमोद भाई, रीता मैम, सभी लोग जैसे भी हैं उसी तरह हम आपको स्वीकार करते हैं। टॉलरेंस करना तो एक मजबूरी है कि हम टॉलरेट कर रहे हैं अग्रवाल साहब को कि आप इतने बड़े आदमी से 2 साल के बाद मिले, हम आपको एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं। आप ऑनलाइन भी मिले तो मुझे आपसे वही मोहब्बत है जो ऑफलाइन मिलने वाली नीलाक्षी जी से, बराबर ही प्रेम दोनों को प्राप्त है। क्योंकि ईश्वर को तो हम देखा नहीं, हमने ईश्वर को, भगवान को हमने देखा नहीं, फिर भी भगवान से प्रेम करते हैं, तो अग्रवाल साहब से कम क्यों करेंगे? आज देख भी लिया, तपस्या करने से भगवान भी उपलब्ध हो जाते हैं। आज देखिए सामने उदाहरण है। तो मेरा कहना है कि टॉलरेंस जो है, हम टॉलरेंस करने वाला विचार नहीं हमारा, भारत का जो विचार है, हम एक्सेप्ट करते हैं आप जैसे भी हैं, काले पीले नीले ऊंचे नीचे खोटे खरे जैसे भी हैं, क्योंकि हर आदमी के अंदर कुछ अवगुण होते हैं, कुछ गुण होते हैं, कुछ खूबियां हर आदमी में होती हैं। एक शायर लिखता है, खूबियां तो उसमें होंगी कुछ जरूर, क्यों किसी के ऐब ही देखा करूं। अब कार्बल मैडम जैसा मैं गा नहीं सकता, इसका मतलब तो मैं खराब आदमी हूं। मैं भाषण तो अच्छा झाड़ रहा हूं, गाना नहीं गा पाया उतना अच्छा, प्रार्थना उतनी अच्छी नहीं कर सकता, पर दूसरे काम कर सकता हूं। शायद मैं बहुत अच्छे पौधे लगा सकता हूं, अच्छा गार्डनर हूं, बहुत अच्छी खेती कर सकता हूं, बहुत अच्छा खाना पका सकता हूं, लोगों की सेवा में हमेशा खड़ा रहता हूं। तो ये भी तो एक जिम्मेदारी है, ये भी तो काम है। हमारे कहते जो देता है वो देवता है। आप गांव में जाइए, कोई आदमी दिनायत, फुल अकल कम होगी, खूब दिनायतदार होगा, सबकी सेवा में खड़ा रहता होगा, लोग कहते बिल्कुल देवता आदमी है। पर हमने जो नया डिस्कोर्स है उसमें जो देवता आदमी है उसको मूर्ख भी कहा जा रहा है। इस बात की चिंता करने की जरूरत है कि हमने रूट्स को अपने छोड़ा है कहीं ना कहीं। इसी शहर के एक शायर हुए, बल्ली महारान की गलियों में बड़े हुए, गालिब क्या लिखते हैं? गालिब लिखते हैं, यूं तो मुश्किल है हर काम का आसान होना, आदमी को मैसर नहीं इंसान होना। यूं तो मुश्किल है हर काम का आसान होना, आदमी को मैसर नहीं इंसान होना। यानी इंसान बनने की प्रोसेस है। आप पैदा तो आदमी के रूप में हो जाते हैं, पर इंसान बनने की एक प्रोसेस है, उस प्रोसेस को पूरा करना पड़ता है, तब आप इंसान बनते हैं। और इसलिए हिंदू धर्म ग्रंथ भी कहते हैं मनुर्भव, मनुष्य बनो, क्योंकि आप मनुष्य नहीं हो, आपको मनुष्य बनने के लिए एक प्रोसेस पूरा करना पड़ता है। ये दिनायतदारी अपने अंदर पैदा करना पड़ेगी, सेवा की भावना पैदा करनी पड़ेगी, लोगों को एक्सेप्ट करना पड़ेगा, लोगों को साथ लेके चलना पड़ेगा। एक अगर सुंदर दुनिया बनानी है, एक बेहतर दुनिया बनानी है, ये कहने से नहीं होगा कि हम वसुधैव कुटुंबकम कह दें, वसुधैव कुटुंबकम कहें और अपने पड़ोसी का भी बुरा सोचते रहें। उसके पास नई गाड़ी आई तो हमने जाके खुरच दिया उसको, थोड़ा सा उसकी गाड़ी की हवा निकाल दी, ये विचार नहीं। तो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम कहना और वसुधैव कुटुंबकम को जीना। ग्रंथ कह रहा है, क्या कहता है ऋषि कह रहा है, अयम निजा परोवेति गणना लघु चेतिशाम उदार चरिता नाम तो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम। ये अपना है पराया है, ये बात छोटे मन के लोग करते हैं, और जो बड़े मन के लोग होते हैं उनके लिए पूरी दुनिया ही परिवार है। पर ये तो ऋषि कह रहा है, हम आप नहीं कह रहे। समस्या ये है कि हम धर्मों को, पंथों को अपने गाते हैं, उनके बारे में बोलते हैं, उनका जीवन में अप्लाई नहीं करते। और वो धर्म किसी काम का नहीं है, हमारे जीवन में नहीं उतरे। अच्छी बातें करने से कुछ नहीं होता, अच्छी चीजों को जीने से होता है। बाबा रामदेव कहते हैं, फाजिल साहब, बाबा रामदेव कहते हैं करने से होता है, करना पड़ेगा, सिर्फ कहने से नहीं होगा। मंच पर आकर अच्छी अच्छी बातें करना, या तो हमारे यहाँ इसके बारे में तो एक्सपर्टीज है लोगों की, सारा ज्ञान दूसरों के लिए। तुलसीदास जी लगते हैं, पर उपदेश कुशल बहु तेरे, दूसरों को उपदेश देने में तो मास्टरी हमारी है। हिंदुस्तानियों जैसा मास्टर इस दुनिया में कोई नहीं है, सबसे आगे होंगे हिंदुस्तानी ज्ञान देने में। ज्ञान को अगर अप्लीकेबल नहीं बनाया, ज्ञान को जीवन में नहीं उतारा, और ये सिर्फ हम मीडिया की बात नहीं करते, हम तो इसकी बात कहते हैं, अच्छे मनुष्य का निर्माण होगा तब अच्छे पत्रकार का भी निर्माण होगा। ये जो बाह्य जैसी संस्थाएं हैं, जितने हमारे आध्यात्मिक संगठन हैं, ये क्या काम कर रहे हैं? ये यही काम कर रहे हैं, अच्छे मनुष्य का निर्माण। जब अच्छे मनुष्य का निर्माण होगा तो अपने आप अच्छे जर्नलिस्ट भी मिलेंगे, अच्छे डॉक्टर भी मिलेंगे, अच्छे राजनेता मिलेंगे, अच्छे प्रशासक मिलेंगे, सब लोग अच्छे होंगे। और हमारी साथ समस्या क्या हुई कि हमने व्यक्ति निर्माण का जो काम था वो छोड़ दिया, सोसाइटी की जो अच्छे कामों था वो सब छोड़ दिया। ये तो इनका काम है, ये राजनीति का काम है, ये लोग करेंगे। कोई अच्छा आदमी आजकल काम करना चाहता, अच्छा अग्रवाल साहब, कोई अच्छे से काम करता, लोगों की मदद करता है, लोग कहते हैं आपको नेता बनना है क्या? तुमको इतनी नेतागिरी क्यों आ रही है? आप सोचिए, हमने कहां से कहां गिरा दिया सेवा की भावना को। सर्विस जो हमारे डीएनए का हिस्सा है, जिसके नाते हमारी आध्यात्मिक संस्थाएं ये सब हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, सर्विस को आज नेतागिरी माना जाता है। आप लोगों की मदद कर रहे हैं, इसके पीछे आपका स्वार्थ क्या है ये बताइए, आप बताइए। परमार्थ के कारण साधुन धरा शरीर, हमने परमार्थ के लिए जन्म लिया, आज हम परमार्थ करते तो पूछा जाता आपका उद्देश्य क्या, एक्चुअल क्या है? आपको पार्षद बनना है क्या? आप इतने क्यों परेशान रहते हो मोहल्ले के लिए? वाह भाई, यानी कि हमने एक ऐसा समाज बना दिया है अपने ट्रेनिंग से कि हम सिर्फ अपने बारे में, अपनी फैमिली के बारे में विचार करते हैं, बाकी हमको पड़ोस को भी देखना नहीं। मुझे लगता है कि ये मार्ग किसी भी अच्छे विचार का मार्ग नहीं है, इससे अच्छी दुनिया नहीं बन सकती। और इसलिए हम सिर्फ जर्नलिज्म की बात ना करें, सिर्फ जर्नलिस्ट को दोष ना दें, सिर्फ जर्नलिस्ट खराब हो गया ऐसा ना करें, बल्कि पूरी दुनिया में जो गिरावट हुई है सब प्रकार के प्रोफेशन में, उसको भी देखिए। डॉक्टर जो देवता है हमारी जिंदगी में, वो कहता है कि आप बिस्तर पे लेट जाइए, अब आप 50,000 रुपये जमा कर दिए, फिर मैं इनका इलाज करूंगा। अरे वाह भाई, न डॉक्टर वैसे, न वकील वैसे, न टीचर वैसे, न प्रोफेसर वैसे, कोई भी वैसा नहीं है। एक जो मजदूर है वो भी सोचता है कि मैं 2 घंटे बीड़ी पी लूं और 6 घंटे काम करूं। सब ने अपने लिए सरल मार्ग तलाश रखा है। मुझे लगता है कि ये मूल्यों की गिरावट है, ये वैल्यूज का नीचे गिर जाना। इसलिए हमें हर क्षेत्रों में वैल्यूज कैसे स्थापित हो इसके लिए काम करना पड़ेगा। और इसलिए 2 तरह की बातें मैं आपसे कहना चाहता हूं। पहला ये है कि हम वैल्यू बेस्ड सोसाइटी खड़ी करें, वैल्यू बेस्ड मीडिया बनाएं, जो मीडिया मूल्यों पर आधारित हो, जो वैल्यूज पे काम करे। हमें ऐसे जर्नलिस्ट, ऐसे लोग खड़े करने पड़ेंगे जो वैल्यूज पर भरोसा रखते हो। दूसरा, हमें जर्नलिज्म को एक सीढ़ी आगे लेके जाना पड़ेगा, जिसको हम सॉल्यूशन बेस्ड जर्नलिज्म कह रहे हैं। अभी तक क्या सिखाया गया कि सवाल उठाओ और भाग जाओ। मीनाक्षी जी, सवाल उठाओ और भाग जाओ। जर्नलिस्ट बड़ी जिम्मेदारी से कहते हैं कि हमारा काम तो सवाल उठाना है, हम सवाल पूछने के लिए पैदा हुए। एक बार बड़े आनंद की बात है, हमारे पूर्व चुनाव आयुक्त श्रीमान TN सेशन साहब जब रिटायर हो गए, उनकी प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस हुई आखिरी। पत्रकारों ने उनसे पूछा कि आप आगे चल के क्या करना चाहेंगे। उन्होंने मजे के लिए कहा कि मैं जर्नलिस्ट बनूंगा। तो बोले क्यों? बोले जर्नलिस्ट में क्या करना है, सिर्फ सवाल पूछना है और कुछ नहीं करना, इसलिए मैं जर्नलिस्ट बनना चाहता हूं। मुझे लगता है कि हमें सोल्यूशन बेस्ड जर्नलिज्म दुनिया में, इसके बारे में प्रमोद जी बात करेंगे, मैं इस विषय को छोड़ के जा रहा हूं, प्रमोद जी इस बारे में बात करेंगे। सोल्यूशन बेस्ड जर्नलिज्म पर इन्होंने काफी काम कर रखा है, इसलिए मैं इनका विषय चुराना नहीं चाहता। तो हम समाधान भी सोचें। हम एक खबर बनाते हैं, उस खबर में हम समस्या खड़ी करते हैं कि भाई ये इस तरह की समस्याएं हैं, इस तरह के संकट हैं, पर उस क्षेत्र के विशेषज्ञ, मानिए हमारे शहर का प्रदूषण बहुत बढ़ा हुआ है, कई लोग कहते हैं गैस चैम्बर में हम रहते हैं, तो उसका समाधान क्या है उसके बारे में हमारे पास जानकारी नहीं है। हम 4 विशेषज्ञों से बात करके उसका समाधान भी प्रस्तुत करें, क्योंकि सोसाइटी अच्छी तब बनेगी, मीडिया लोगों के लिए तब कारगर होगा जब वो समस्याओं के साथ साथ समाधान भी प्रस्तुत करेगा। और मुझे लगता है ये बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेदारी हमारे सामने है कि हम अपने समाज के प्रश्नों के ठोस और वाजिब हल तलाशें। वही समाज जो है अपनी मुक्ति के लिए आगे बढ़ता है जिस समाज में उस समाज के प्रश्नों के बारे में लोग सोचते हैं, उनका हल तलाशते हैं। आप देखिए हमारे राष्ट्रपिता महात्मा गांधी कितने सारे मोर्चों पे काम करते हैं। वो एक राजनेता हैं, पर वो समाज सुधारक भी हैं, वो स्वच्छता अभियान के प्रखर प्रवक्ता भी हैं, वो स्त्री शिक्षा के बारे में बात करते हैं। समाज जीवन का कोई ऐसा क्षेत्र नहीं है जिसके बारे में राष्ट्रपिता ने बात नहीं की। क्यों? वो एक राजनेता बन के अच्छे से रह सकते थे, पर उन्होंने कहा नहीं, मेरा जीवन ही संदेश है, सीख सको तो मेरी जिंदगी से सीखो। इसलिए हमें अपनी जिंदगी को एक आदर्श के रूप में प्रस्तुत करना पड़ेगा। हमारे बच्चे हमसे क्या सीखते हैं? हम जैसा कहते हैं, जैसा करते हैं, उनसे सीखते हैं। पर अफसोस कि अब हमारे बच्चों के सामने हमसे सीखने का मौका भी नहीं बचा। अब वो सोशल मीडिया से सीखते हैं, अब वो बाकी चीज़ों से सीखते हैं, मेन कोर्स पे नहीं जाते, मेन टेक्स्ट पे नहीं जाते। ये एक तरह का संकट पैदा हुआ है, एक लैक ऑफ कंसंट्रेशन का भी चक्कर है कि एक एकाग्रता हमारी भंग हो गई है। हम बहुत देर तक किसी विषय पर बात नहीं कर पाते। अभी मैं जैसे 20-25 मिनट होंगे आपको प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी। तो ये जो लैक ऑफ कंसंट्रेशन है वो बनाने की ज़रूरत है। इसलिए आध्यात्मिक संगठनों की शरण में जाना जरूरी है। किसी न किसी स्पिरिचुअल पथ पे अगर आप नहीं चलेंगे, आपका पूरा व्यवसाय, पूरा काम और आपका जीवन भी उतना बेहतर नहीं हो पाएगा जितना आप बेहतर बनाना चाहते हैं। आप देखिए जो लोग भी उत्कर्ष पे गए उनके रोल मॉडल्स कौन हैं, जो भी बड़े, आप अन्ना हजारे को लीजिए, लेटेस्ट विवेकानंद। कोई ना कोई आपकी ज़िंदगी में स्पिरिचुअलिटी की स्पेस होनी चाहिए। अगर आपकी ज़िंदगी में स्पिरिचुअलिटी की स्पेस नहीं है, आप स्पिरिचुअल लाइफ नहीं जी रहे हैं, अपने काम में आप डिलीवर नहीं कर सकते जैसा आपको करना चाहिए। ये मैं बड़ी जिम्मेदारी से कहता हूँ, बहुत जिम्मेदारी से कह रहा हूँ। इसलिए हमारा काम यानी हमारा जीविका और जीवन अलग अलग चलने चाहिए। अगर जीवन और जीविका दोनों एक हो गए, आपका जीवन अच्छा नहीं चल सकता। नष्ट हो जाएगा मैं नहीं कहता, पर अच्छा नहीं चल सकता। हमारा प्रोफेशन जर्नलिज्म हो सकता है, मेरा प्रोफेशन डॉक्टरी हो सकता है, मेरा प्रोफेशन मास्टरी हो सकता है, मैं टेलरिंग का काम कर सकता हूं, पर यह मेरा जीवन नहीं है। जीवन मेरा अलग है। जब मैं घर लौटूं अपने, तो घर में डीजी को नहीं लौटना, घर में एक पिता को लौटना, एक पति को लौटना, एक पुत्र को लौटना, एक भाई को लौटना, एक बहन को लौटना। घर पर अगर प्रिंसिपल साहब लौटेंगे प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी। घर पे अग्रवाल साहब एक पिता की तरह जाएं, एक पुत्र की तरह जाएं, एक भाई की तरह जाएंगे, दुनिया में अच्छा रहेगा। क्योंकि ये चीजें स्थायी नहीं है। आज है प्रिंसिपल है, कल प्रिंसिपल नहीं रहेंगे। आज मैं डीजी हूं, अगले साल बाहर किया जाने वाला हूं। अब जो चीज होनी रहनी ही नहीं मेरे पास, उसको लेके मैं पागल हो रहा हूं, तो मेरी तो बैंड बजनी तय है। क्या बजेगी बच्चों, बोलो? बैंड, ताली नहीं बजेगी, बैंड बजेगी। तो ये ध्यान रखिए इस बात को। हमें अपने को जमीन पे रखना है, सोसाइटी को लौटाना है। हम इतने भाग्यशाली लोग हैं, लोटस टेम्पल में बैठकर एसी चल रहा है, इतने ज्ञानी लोग बैठे हुए हैं, सब इतने विद्वान लोग बैठे, इतने सुंदर कपड़ों में बैठे हुए हैं। क्या हिंदुस्तान यही है? आप सोचिए कितने प्रिविलेज हैं आप। रामानुजम कॉलेज में एडमिशन हो गया, प्रमोद जी आईएमसी में नौकरी कर रहे हैं, नीलाक्षी मैडम बिल्कुल यहाँ पे इतनी बड़ी इसकी बॉस है, विनीता मैडम एचओडी हैं। कितने लोग को ये प्रिविलेज प्राप्त होता है? इतना बड़ा हिंदुस्तान है। स्कूलों के भवन नहीं है, पानी सिर पे टप टप आ रहा है, इस फर्नीचर नहीं है, बैठने के इंतजाम नहीं है, किताबें नहीं है, इस तरह की पानी की बोतलें नहीं है, गिलास भी घर में नहीं है, खाने के लिए राशन नहीं है, वो भी चल रहे हैं। इसलिए अगर ईश्वर ने इतना कुछ हमको बख्शा है, भाई ये तो आपका किया नहीं है ना, कि आपने किया सारा, ईश्वर ने हमें दिया है और उसकी कृपा से मिला है, जिसकी शरण में आप जाग उठे। तो अगर आप जाग उठे हैं उनकी शरण में आकर के, तो अब आपके वापसी करने का वक्त है। इतने अच्छे कॉलेज से पढ़कर, इतनी अच्छी संस्थाओं में काम करके अगर हम लोगों को वापस नहीं करते, तो हमारी जिंदगी का मतलब क्या है? तो सिर्फ पेट भरने के लिए नहीं, सिर्फ अपनी ज़िंदगी के लिए नहीं, दूसरों के बारे में विचार करिए। दुनिया भी अच्छी बनेगी, जर्नलिज्म भी अच्छा बनेगा और हमारे परिवार भी अच्छे बनेंगे। और जब हम इस दुनिया को छोड़ के जा रहे हैं तो लोग हमें एक अच्छे मनुष्य के रूप में याद करेंगे। आज के इस मौके पर मुझे इतना ही कहना था। मुझे यहाँ बुलाने के लिए आप सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नीलाक्षी मैडम खासकर धन्यवाद कि उन्होंने मुझे यहाँ बुलाया और बातें करने का मौका दिया। थैंक यू।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद संजय द्विवेदी जी। आपने हर आस्पेक्ट, ज़िंदगी के हर आस्पेक्ट और जर्नलिज़म के हर आस्पेक्ट को डिस्कस किया और मैं समझता हूँ यंगस्टर्स के पास काफ़ी इन्फॉर्मेशन गई होगी कि सोशल मीडिया और नॉन जर्नलिस्ट एक्टिविस्ट उन सब से कैसे बच के रहना है। ये एक सवाल भी है और सॉल्यूशन भी है। और उन्होंने बेसिक जो बात की वो वैल्यू बेस्ड सोसाइटी एंड मीडिया, वैल्यू बेस्ड सोसाइटी एंड मीडिया। देखिए मैं आपको यहाँ एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ कि हमने जो ये कॉलेज रामानुजन आज जिस स्टेज पर है, देशबंधु इवनिंग कॉलेज के नाम से जाना जाता था और एक सेंटर फॉर एथिक्स एंड वैल्यूज़ 2010 में इस्टेब्लिश किया और देखिए अब हम कहाँ पर हैं। तो ये वैल्यू एजुकेशन का ही सब रोल है। अभी एक बड़ी इम्पॉर्टेंट बात द्विवेदी जी ने कही कि मैं आज प्रिंसिपल हूँ, वो डीजी हैं, हम ये देखते रहते हैं कि हमें नेक्स्ट क्या करना है, हम अपने काम को भूल जाते हैं। वो डीजी का काम नहीं कर रहे, वो ये देख रहे हैं कि मुझे अगली असाइनमेंट क्या मिलेगी। मैं ये देख रहा हूँ कि मैं वाइस चांसलर कैसे बनूंगा, मैं अपने काम को भूल रहा हूँ। ये बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है इस सोसाइटी का। तो इसका भी बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ है कि हमें जो असाइनमेंट दी जाती है पहले उसको ध्यान करें, मिलना ना मिलना वो वहाँ ऊपर वाले के हाथ में है और उस पर बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है। और सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट बात जो उन्होंने कही कि मीडिया और जर्नलिज्म में भी प्रॉब्लम ये है कि एजुकेटेड जो लोग हैं, एजुकेटेड जर्नलिज्म, एजुकेटेड मीडिया, उनका एक स्पेसिफिक रोल है, ना कि किसी भी मीडिया पर्सनैलिटी का। उसके बहुत सारे एग्जांपल्स हैं, मैं भी आपके साथ, बट हमारे पास समय नहीं है। तो मैं अपने नेक्स्ट स्पीकर को इनवाइट करूंगा। थोड़ा हम सर लेट चल रहे हैं प्रमोद जी, तो गुजारिश है आप अपना वक्तत्व 10 मिनट में ही कोशिश करें। प्रमोद जी सेंट्रल यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ हिमाचल प्रदेश से उन्होंने अपना कैरियर शुरू किया, धर्मशाला से, एज एन असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर, सेंटर फॉर दीन दयाल उपाध्याय स्टडीज़। सर उस यूनिवर्सिटी से हमारा भी बड़ा लिंक है, हमारे भी एक प्रोफेसर वहाँ गए थे पॉलिटिकल साइंस में, प्रोफेसर गौतम। He joined the Indian Institute of Mass Communication in October 2020 as professor in English journalism. वो English journalism में हैं, और he has an additional charge of Urdu journalism, course director. He is also Dean Student Welfare, HOD Outreach and Placement, and editor of IMC's prestigious research journal Sanchar Madhyam. So we welcome Professor Pramod Kumar.
थैंक यू अग्रवाल साहब। प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर संजय द्विवेदी जी, ऑनरेबल डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ आईएमसी, डॉक्टर एसपी अग्रवाल जी, नीलाक्षी जी, मेरी बड़ी बहन और जर्नलिज्म में मेरी सीनियर प्रोफेसर विनीता गुप्ता जी, बहुत दिनों बाद आज विनीता जी से मिलना हुआ है। After the inspiring words of Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, I feel I have nothing special to share at this moment. But the issues that he has raised, particularly the solution-based journalism, and also media literacy, I think these are the two very important key takeaways today from his speech. मुझे याद आ रहा है कि 99 की एक घटना डॉक्टर एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम ने 2007 में सुनाई थी, जब वो रामनाथ गोयनका अवार्ड दिल्ली में दे रहे थे। रामनाथ गोयनका अवार्ड के बारे में ज़्यादा विस्तार से बताने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। उन्होंने कहा कि 99 में मैं तेल अवीव गया, और जब मैं वहाँ गया तो खबर चल रही थी टीवी चैनल्स पर कि लेबनान बॉर्डर्स पर हमास का अटैक हुआ और जिसमें बहुत कैजुअल्टी हुई, बहुत डिस्ट्रक्शन हुआ। जैसा इंडिया में देखते हैं, उन्होंने नेक्स्ट डे के अखबार देखे, बड़े साइंटिस्ट थे, अखबार आए उनके पास, तो सारे अखबार के पन्ने पलटे। उन्होंने कहा कि वो जो कल बॉर्डर पर हमला हुआ, टेररिस्ट अटैक हुआ, उसकी कोई खबर नहीं है, फ्रंट पेज पर कोई खबर नहीं। वो पन्ने पलटते रहे, वो कहते हैं कि अंदर के किसी पेज पर मुझे सिर्फ एक कॉलम की खबर मिली, लेबनान बॉर्डर पर टेररिस्ट अटैक, बहुत कैजुअल्टी और बहुत डिस्ट्रक्शन, और खबर अंदर के पेज पर एक कॉलम में। अब आप सोचिए, अगर इस प्रकार की घटना हिंदुस्तान में कहीं हुई होती तो वो खबर कहाँ छपती? फ्रंट पेज पर फर्स्ट लीड होती है, और जब फ्रंट पेज पर फर्स्ट लीड डिस्ट्रक्शन, वायलेंस और इस प्रकार की चीज़ों को हम देंगे, तो उसके बाद द टॉपिक दैट वी आर डिस्कसिंग टुडे, द रोल ऑफ द मीडिया इन फॉस्टरिंग कंस्ट्रक्टिव पब्लिक डिस्कोर्स। जब हम आतंकवादियों की घटनाओं को, आतंकवाद की घटनाओं को, उनके डिस्ट्रक्शन को, उनके एजेंडे को जब हम फ्रंट पेज पर स्पेस देंगे, तो उसके बाद हम ये एक्सपेक्ट करें कि कंस्ट्रक्टिव डिस्कोर्स होगा। आप आज कोई भी अखबार उठा लीजिए, प्रोफेसर संजय द्विवेदी जी ने बहुत विस्तार से चीज़ें बताई हैं। आप कोई भी अखबार सुबह उठा लीजिए, कोई भी टीवी चैनल आप ऑन कर लीजिए, और जो सो कॉल्ड मीडिया पोर्टल्स हैं, न्यूज़ पोर्टल्स हैं, आप उन्हें ओपन करिए। आप पोर्टल को स्क्रॉल कीजिए, आप अखबार के पन्ने पलटिए, आप टीवी चैनल के देखिए, खबर देखिए और डिबेट देखिए। उसके बाद मन में क्या भाव आएगा? माहौल बहुत खराब हो गया है, आपके अंदर नेगेटिव वाइब्रेशंस होंगे। आप सोचिए, जब आप सुबह अखबार पढ़ते हैं, मेरी जो एज ग्रुप के लोग हैं वो तो अखबार पढ़ते हैं अभी भी, इसलिए प्रिंट को कम से कम अगले 20-25 साल कोई खतरा नहीं है, जब तक हम जैसे रीडर हैं। हम लोगों की आदत है कि हम अखबार पढ़ते हैं, हम टीवी चैनल देखते हैं, लेकिन अखबार भी पढ़ते हैं। जब आप सुबह नेगेटिव न्यूज़ पढ़ेंगे तो आपके मन में क्या वाइब्रेशन होगी? एक अजीब सा आपके मन में आएगा कि ये दुनिया बहुत ख़राब हो रही है, और फिर आप कहेंगे कि अगर यही हालत रही तो हमारे बच्चों का क्या होगा? हम उनके लिए कैसी दुनिया छोड़ के जा रहे हैं? यही हमारा जो आज का टॉपिक है वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। आप सोचिए, अगर आपको प्रोफेसर द्विवेदी जी ने कहा है कि मीडिया में आज हालत ये हो गई कि सवाल खड़े करो और भाग जाओ। ये कहाँ लिखा है कि आप सवाल खड़े कर रहे हैं? अच्छी बात है, मीडिया सवाल नहीं खड़े करेगा तो कौन करेगा, लेकिन आपको समाधान की भी तो बात करनी चाहिए। अगर किसी प्रॉब्लम का कोई सॉल्यूशन है, आपको वो भी डिस्कस करना चाहिए, आपको उसे भी स्पेस देना चाहिए। और यहीं पर हमारा मीडिया पिछड़ रहा है, यहीं से हमारे रीडर्स के जो हमारे मीडिया के जो रीडर्स हैं, ऑडियंस है, वो उससे छूट रहा है। इस पर हमें बहुत गंभीरता से सोचने की ज़रूरत है। आप सोचिए, अगर सुबह हमें कोई ऐसी खबर पढ़ने को मिलती है कि कोई एक व्यक्ति, इंडिविजुअल या ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के रूप में कोई आदमी कोई रचनात्मक काम कर रहा है, लोगों में कोई कंस्ट्रक्टिव एक्टिविटी कर रहा है, तो वो पढ़ने के बाद हमारे मन में आएगा, चलिए कुछ लोग अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं। आपको थोड़ा और प्रभावित तो आपको लगा कि हमें ऐसे लोगों को सपोर्ट करना चाहिए, और अच्छी प्रेरणा मिल गई तो आप कहेंगे हमें भी ऐसा कोई काम शुरू करना चाहिए। सिर्फ खबर ही तो है, आप जो खबर पढ़ रहे हैं अखबार में, वो खबर आपको पॉजिटिविटी की ओर भी ले जा सकती है और आप में एक अवसाद भी पैदा कर सकती है। आपके अंदर एक ऐसा माहौल पैदा कर देगी जिससे आपको लगेगा कि दुनिया में कुछ अच्छा बचा ही नहीं है। ये खबर की ताकत है। और आज मीडिया में अगर हमें एक पॉजिटिव डिस्कोर्स, कंस्ट्रक्टिव डिस्कोर्स अगर हमें खड़ा करना है, तो हमें आज मीडिया को ज़रूरत है कि वो अपने रीडर्स को एक कंस्ट्रक्टिव एजेंडा दे, जिस पर वो सोचें, विचार करें और इस समाज को, इस देश को कुछ रीपे करने की बात करें, जिसकी प्रोफेसर द्विवेदी जी ने बात की है। हमें जो मिला है, हम समाज को, देश को क्या रीपे कर रहे हैं। तो प्रोफेसर अग्रवाल जी ने समय की मर्यादा शुरू में रख दी थी, इसलिए मैं उसे क्रॉस नहीं करूंगा। मैं सिर्फ यही निवेदन कर रहा हूं कि मीडिया को एक एजेंडा पॉजिटिव अपने रीडर्स को देना पड़ेगा, सो दैट कि वो एक समाज में बदलाव का काम करें, और हम सब एज ए रीडर, एज ए ऑडियंस, हम भी उस बदलाव में सहभागी बने। तब देश में एक पॉजिटिव इन्वायरमेंट होगा। मैं फिर एक बात रिपीट कर रहा हूं कि मैं ये बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहा हूं कि मीडिया को आंख मूंद लेनी चाहिए। मैं आंख मूंदने के लिए नहीं कह रहा हूं। जो समाज में कहीं भी, सिस्टम में कहीं भी कुछ अगर गलत हो रहा है, उसके बारे में आवाज़ मीडिया को उठानी है, लेकिन हम आवाज़ उठाते समय सवाल खड़े करके भागे नहीं, हम समाधान की भी चर्चा करें। और समाधान आज पूरे विश्व में चर्चा हो रही है। सिर्फ 1 मिनट लूँगा। BBC और न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स ने 2017-19 में, आप अभी गूगल कर सकते हैं, अपने ऑनलाइन ऑडियंस पर जो रिसर्च किया है, उसकी फाइंडिंग्स क्या है। लोग पॉजिटिव, कंस्ट्रक्टिव खबरें पढ़ना चाहते हैं, और BBC ने अपना पैटर्न चेंज किया। आज वहाँ पर पूरी स्पेशल डेस्क है पॉजिटिव सॉल्यूशन जर्नलिज्म के लिए। भारत में एक अखबार है हिंदी का, उसने एक कैंपेन शुरू की है, नो नेगेटिव मंडे। आप बताइए कितने लोगों को नाम याद है उसके, जरा हाथ उठाइए एक बार। हिंदी का एक अखबार है जिसने एक कैंपेन शुरू की है, नो नेगेटिव मंडे, और मंडे को वो नेगेटिव खबर नहीं छापता, बहुत इंस्पायरिंग खबर का कवर पेज पे छापता। जरा बताइए एक बार, जिसे मालूम है हाथ खड़ा कीजिए। उसका नाम है दैनिक भास्कर। कई साल से वो कर रहा है। ऐसे लोगों के, ऐसे संस्थानों के बारे में, ऐसी संस्थाओं के बारे में हमें जानकारी होनी चाहिए। एक दूसरा अखबार है दिल्ली में जो छापता है एडिटोरियल पेज पर, मंजिलें और भी हैं, उसका नाम है अमर उजाला। और एक अखबार है दैनिक जागरण जो इस प्रकार की कंस्ट्रक्टिव खबरों को फ्रंट पेज पर फर्स्ट लीड बनाता है। फर्स्ट लीड सिंगल कॉलम में खबर को शुरू करता है, अंदर विस्तार से खबर देता है। जो लोग इस प्रकार के प्रयोग कर रहे हैं उन्हें हमें प्रोत्साहित करना चाहिए। बात सिर्फ ये है कि अगर अपने रीडर्स को आप एक अच्छा पॉजिटिव एजेंडा दे रहे हैं तो समाज में बदलाव आएगा, और अगर आप नेगेटिविटी फैला रहे हैं अपने रीडर्स खोरेंगे और समाज को भी हम कहीं ना कहीं दिग्भ्रमित कर रहे हैं। हमारे ऑडियंस हमारे हाथ से निकल जाएंगे। मीडिया को, हम सबको इस पर गंभीरता से विचार करना चाहिए। मैं भाई ऑफिस का बहुत बहुत आभारी हूँ कि उन्होंने मुझे लास्ट मोमेंट पे ही सही यहाँ पर अपनी बात रखने का मौका दिया है। बहुत बहुत आभार, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Professor Kumar. You have very rightly pointed out that constructive, positive discourse is very important, or constructive agenda is very important. And main important thing he highlighted, that even in spite of the fact that there are a lot of negativity or negative news, whether in electronic or print media, but that should not overpower you with your positive intent. That is very important. Another important thing I would say, and then we will finish this. See, the basic, takeaway from this is that first of all, you need to be a good human being to become a good media person, which Professor Sanjay Dwivedi said. Another important thing is education is important to, change our youth, or to make us most wiser people. But that in itself is not complete unless until the spiritual education is combined with that. We want to become Vishwa Guru. How can we Vishwa Guru? हमारे पास ऐसा क्या चीज़ है जिससे विश्व गुरु बनेंगे? वो है स्पिरिचुअल एजुकेशन। तो कैसे ये जो साइंटिफिक एजुकेशन है, सोशल साइंस एजुकेशन है, कॉमर्स एजुकेशन है, इसके साथ स्पिरिचुअल एजुकेशन को कंबाइन किया जाए, उसी तरीके से जर्नलिज्म की जो क्वालिफिकेशन है उसके साथ स्पिरिचुअल जर्नलिज्म और एथिकल जर्नलिज्म कंबाइन किया जाए, तभी हमारी कोई बात वर्ल्ड में सुनेगा और हमें मानेगा कि हम वाकई में ही विश्व गुरु हैं। तो विद दिस नोट, वंस अगेन आई थैंक आवर चीफ गेस्ट प्रोफेसर द्विवेदी, आई थैंक प्रोफेसर प्रमोद कुमार, एंड आई फाइनली थैंक Mrs. Nilakshi Rajkova and Bhai House, who has been so, open-hearted to this institution, that we have been doing several programs with them. During COVID there was a break, but we will revive that, and we will definitely keep on doing something or the other for the betterment of the society and for the betterment of the youth. Thank you very much.
The inaugural session comes to an end, and it was definitely filled with multiple thoughts and a lot of different insights. So to put forth such views, we would like to thank our esteemed speakers and would like to felicitate them as a token of gratitude, a small memento. So to begin with, I would like to call upon Dr. S.P. Agarwal to felicitate our guest of honor, Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, who is the Director General of Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Next, I would like to request Mrs. Nilakshi Rajkova, the Director of Office of Public Affairs of the Baha'is of India, to please felicitate Professor Dr. Pramod Kumar, Dean Students Welfare and Course Director, Urdu Journalism, IIMC. Now, I would like to request Mrs. Carmel Tripathi, the Director of Office of Public Information, Baha'i House of Worship, and Office of Public Affairs, to please felicitate Dr. S.P. Agarwal to chair the session. Thank you so much. Now we would like to request our speakers to have a group photograph in front of the dais all together. Yeah, on that side. Yeah. Okay. Do I have to call the speakers also?
Thank you so much, Mona, and it's a privilege to be here and to be able to be part of this very distinguished group of friends and colleagues and media practitioners, media educators who are here to deliberate on a very important theme. I think we are all here because we recognize the significance of the subject. And this morning during the inaugural session, a lot of our thinking was directed towards the role of the journalist. But I think before passing on to the speakers, I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone that there is another very important component to the theme of our discussion, which is public discourse. And I think perhaps that is also a theme that we need to take very seriously and give a lot of attention to, because like Nilakshi was mentioning this morning, the health of our society depends on how well we as a society are able to converse with each other, to think together, to be able to express different opinions which are well informed, which allow us to come to a consensus that is able to bring people together. Public discourse has a role, extremely important role in our democracy, not just in the sense of informing policy, but also in bringing the diverse elements of society together. Because unless we are able to think together and share our different perspectives on issues of common concern, and do it in a way where we can together come to a consensus, it becomes difficult to achieve the kind of acceptance that Professor Sanjay Dwivedi was talking about, because otherwise even tolerance may be an ambitious goal. It becomes just avoiding each other in the best scenario. So, and this is perhaps an issue which we as a society in India and all over the world right now are not sufficiently thinking about, not conscious of the fact that this requires specific attention, it requires capacity building, without which our ability to function as a society that is democratic, that gives expression to diverse points of view, and that has a mechanism by which society is able to bring its voice to bear on issues of collective concern, that mechanism will not exist. And then all the things that the previous speakers were saying happens when a society is not empowered to take charge of its own well-being. And then you have journalists who can take society for a ride. You have leaders who can basically take the whole project of development for hostage. So, with just these few comments, and I'm sure my those who follow will are much better capable at informing us and sharing their insights on the theme of our discussion today. I would like to invite our first speaker on this panel, Mr. Rohit Gandhi. Rohit is an international award-winning journalist and a documentary filmmaker who has been in the news space for nearly 27 years and has worked for most of his career with news networks like CNN International and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. He has been posted in countries like China, Russia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and has covered conflict and disasters most of his career. Most recently, he was involved in producing the series Pandemic, which is available on Netflix. So, before handing over to Rohit, I would like to request our speakers to try and stick to the 15-minute time limit, because we are a little bit, off schedule. And also, I would like to request our participants. This is public discourse in action. So remember, you are part of this as much as the speakers. You are not just here to sit passively and, get a day's attendance and then go back. The purpose of this gathering is incomplete without your participation. So please make note of your questions, your comments to what the speakers are saying. And we have time, not a lot of time, but some time in between and at the end where we will have discussion. Over to you, Rohit.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Dr. Arsh Fazli. I heard the discussion this morning as it unfolded, and the kind of, the non-acceptance of sides of our media today. We cannot reject the landscape of journalism we have today. We have what we have, and we got to work with it. We have to find out what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. And I think the whole idea of this discussion today on fostering, better communications around and creating that public discourse and the constructiveness is an important part of what we're doing here. And to get a sense of that, and a very good point, Dr. Arsh, because we can go out and, highlight individual journalists and how you can actually find a solution. But, we have very well-defined roles in a democracy. And we must understand our space in the democracy to be able to understand why we are journalists, what is our role here, and it must end there. It should not extend beyond. So to be able to first reach that point where you say, what is my role here? For example, let's say there is a judge. The judge's role is a case is presented to him or her. They make a call on these are the presented facts. They now decide this is the punishment or this is rejected, this is accepted. Their role ends there. There are other parts that take over. Similarly, journalism in itself has a very, very organized part in a democracy. And knowing where your role starts and where your role ends is a very important part of the journalistic landscape. We should never forget that. I'm going to, brace the whole discussion today, starting with a little background. I started the business when about 1993. There were only 19 English television journalists in that country at that time. We used to have one television network. You could pick up each journalist's credibility, and they were spotless. Today, that landscape is far from that. And I think it's a very important part of what the journalism that you see and the abilities that it leverages itself seeing is because of the quality of the talent that we see on the ground. And I think that's something we all need to focus on. That means our education system, the first panelists were all from that side, and you got a sense of the kind of quality of education they were delivering. Gives you a real sense of what's required to start with. Education, consultation, collaboration, all very essential parts of all of that. And so I think a public discourse in the creation will, at the end of the day, be based on the talent pool that you have of people taking that forward. And I think that's a very important part of, we should think about fostering better communication, but if you don't have the right talent pool to do it, then it's going to be a challenge area for delivering that. The talent pool also then should stand on the basis. For example, let's look at 1993 when I started out. There was a Hawala scandal in this country. The Hawala scandal was based on a Jain Hawala diary, which had just notings against each politician's name of how many crores they had gotten from a businessman. And each of those politicians was called to court, whether they were sitting in power, some of them were sitting ministers, or they were politicians of opposition. We as journalists could question. We as journalists could stand up and ask those politicians point blank whether they were in power or out of power, those questions. Today, that's one of the biggest challenges what has happened. And I'm highlighting these challenges before we get to the point of discussing how will we foster, how will we create a more constructive landscape for journalism? What is our role in creating a good public discourse? To create that good public discourse, we'll first have to make sure that we challenge the ones that need to be challenged. And that's going to be part of who we are as journalists. Now, today, the landscape's fairly compromised. Let's recognize it to start with, because if the landscape was not recognized, it was not compromised the level it is compromised at, we wouldn't have the social media we have today. Now, I will also bring that up a bit later about how we cannot reject that social media, but also why it's an essential part of where we are today. We cannot reject all of social media and say, this is gone, forget it, we're not interested in it. Editorial spaces are sold. Most corporates own those media spaces, and they're directly aligned with governments. And that in itself becomes a challenge. And that brings us to a point where journalism professionals need to be even more upright. They need to be able to stand up to people in power and say, I'm sorry, this is wrong and this is right. That whole patting the back attitude is a problem. I see many journalists in this country which carries, Z category security, because they're so compromised, they're constantly scared that people are going to be attacking them. It's not just one group or the other. all my life, most of my life, I traveled through war zones of the world, whether it was Pakistan, whether it was Afghanistan, Iraq. We didn't need to carry weapons. We didn't need to carry security personnel as we went, because when we went in there, the assumption was, based on the history we had, is that we are neutral. We're coming with an open head. We're coming with an open heart to take in the perspectives they'll deliver. And I think to become that tenet of society which will actually bring around better communication, will create a better society, is we need to be preparing our journalists to start the process of listening a little more than talking. Making sure that the perspectives that we hear from people are incorporated in our final landscape. They could be very, very diverse opinions, and that's the whole idea, is to bring a confluence of those ideas and opinions to, you're almost like, being a journalist is like being in a room full of, let's say, 90% of the people who are all aligned on one side, and there may be two lone people standing in that room. They may seem like a minority to you, but that doesn't mean that minority doesn't need to be heard. They need to be brought in, pulled in, brought into the conversation. I'm giving you a little micro opinion, an idea about this, but it reflects more about the larger society that we have. There may be a small group of people who are left out. You will never let that person in that room be left out. And that's, at some level, journalism. That's the kind of space we are looking for, where that diverse opinion also makes it to the platform, or that diverse individual or community, for that matter, and still has this space to speak up and speak out. And I think that's what will create a landscape of good journalism. That's what will create a great location for, great public discourse, because it's a very, very important, part of the responsibility. I'm going to talk a bit about social media now. How many minutes do I have, Archie? 5 minutes. Now, the social media piece, let's agree that it is what's called as echo chambers. If you write certain content, you interact with certain content, that's the content you get constantly on your timelines. Also, opinions are extremely divided. It's okay for that divided opinion to exist, but that's why it's social media, it's not journalism. And that confusion around social media and journalism is a very distinct one. It's fine. That needs to exist, because a lot of the journalists were not doing their role. That's why social media took upon itself to say, all right, there'll be these individuals who will democratize a bit of that news. When content arrives to you from a location, it's news being delivered to you right off the bat. Now, how do you curate it? How do you kind of, structure it? That's where a professional comes in. And so we do rely on the social media, but it doesn't mean that you will not do your fact checks, you will not do your double sourcing of that information. That's your education as a journalist, to be able to do it. So let's understand it's going to exist. It's got billions of, users. Let's not reject it. But at the same time, let's make sure that our processes are in place to be able to even incorporate that side. One of the very important parts which I want to bring up again towards, the conclusion of my argument, or what I'm trying to talk about, is women are left out in the larger landscape of representation. I'm not talking about this room specifically. I see nearly 50% women, maybe even more. But in a larger landscape of society, I see it missing. Now, that representation of women is going to be a very, very important part of our discussion going forward, to be able to help, create a landscape of more fairness. When in the educated circuits, we may still, turn around and say, well, there are enough women. But women don't have the same rights. Now, creating, important, focuses of attention to create a better society is going to be part of what journalism needs to do and what it can do. figuring out areas that these are the people that are left out of the landscape. Our attention first needs to go there. Only when we reach a point where everybody is included, as many people are included in a as fair manner as possible, will we reach a point of creating good solid journalism. And media certainly has that role to play. It's an very integral part of that calm strategy. To remember, 80% of all money that aid agencies spend for disasters is spent on what the media talks about. If the media doesn't talk about it, those disasters get left out. Just to give you a sense of how important that piece is. And unless and until we recognize that the ability and its value that it brings to society, we'll not be doing justice to it. Also, our inability to then create the quality journalists, making sure that their education is in place in the right form, is also going to be a disservice to the society we have. So, in my concluding remarks, I'd like to say that media has a very, very important role. Let's recognize it early on. It is, like they say, the fourth tenet of the democracy. It's the pillar. It has a very specific role. People talked about solution journalism today. There are people for those solutions in society. That's why we are structured the way we are. Our role starts at one point and it must end at one point. It cannot transgress into everything else. It cannot become judiciary, tomorrow police, third day, an armed gunman. We start at a point and we end at a point, because that whole cycle has got multiple people and multiple parts of it. And knowing your limitations and knowing your extent is a very important part. So I don't want you to get misled when we talk about, that I am the one who's going to identify the problem and I'm going to find you the solution, and you will have a hunky-dory society. You don't need any of you at the Baha'i house, and you don't need a political group, and you don't need the police. That's not what it's going to be. It needs to be, our role must stay as our role. Until then, we will not create a better society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for really, in a sense, placing before us some of the issues which hopefully we are going to grapple with in the course of this discussion. I think from your comments, I think you kind of highlighted some of the pressure points that journalists face in building a constructive public discourse. The first thing is, of course, to recognize that, like Rohit was saying, we can't be wishful in our thinking about the media landscape. I mean, social media exists, there is technology, the world is changing, it is rapidly changing, it is globalizing. We are kind of functioning in this slipstream. And the question is not, to take an idealistic stand where we should be. The question is, from where we are and with the forces that are acting on us, how do we navigate? How do we make sure we don't just get washed away? And then I think also he helped us see the complexity of the role of the media, because public discourse is really trying to, help society arrive at a consensus on facts. You see, at the end of the day, if we want to build a better world, we have to agree on what the situation of the world is today. Now, one of the challenges in that is not everyone is even at the table to discuss what the facts are. In other words, there's a whole segments of society whose voice is not included, like he talked about women, but then there are many other excluded segments of society. So this is one of the areas where the role of the media becomes extremely important, and then also to ensure that in the pursuit of consensus, one doesn't lose diversity. Like he was saying, you may have two people, in a large gathering who think differently, but that is part of the consensus, because in this, there's always this tension between unity and justice, in a sense, that if we want to be one as a society, then we have to bring uniformity, we have to gloss over differences. And again, the media has a role, which I think, as our discussion will hopefully help, maybe just flesh out the complexity. I don't know if we'll get all the answers. So, I'd like to invite our next speaker for today, Mr. Rao Narendra Yadav, who is a senior journalist. Should I call you Narendra? Narendra is a senior media and communication professional with more than 17 years of experience in a diverse range of sectors and projects, from print journalism to media training, research development, communications, and capacity building. He began his professional journey with the Times of India as a senior correspondent and subsequently made a transition to the development sector. Over the years, he has worked in areas related to public health, child rights, WASH, environment conservation, urban transport, and sustainable development for several prominent organizations, including UN agencies. So, without taking more time, I would like to invite Narendra to share his comments.
Good morning, everybody. Respected Dr. S.P. Agarwal, Dr. Nilakshi, Dr. Arash Fazil, Avijit sir, who is sitting in the audience today, and my co-speakers and panelists. When the invitation came to me to speak for 15 minutes in this extremely important discussion, and when I saw the theme or the topic of this discussion, I had two reactions. The first one was I was a bit nervous, and second, I was a bit scary too. The reason is the topic says the role of the media in fostering constructive public discourse. It indicates that media needs to introspect. And introspection is something which journalists are really scared of. In my last 17 years of media practice in various ways, it has been very difficult to find media houses, and I'll confine my discussion to mainstream media only. I won't touch so much upon the social media, the independent media. Introspection was never a point of discussion in the editorial meetings. So when I was coming here, I thought, this is going to be a very complex and very difficult talk. And I'm here today to express my views, what I think about the topic, and how journalists or media practitioners can actually play a very positive role, a constructive role in furthering a positive social discourse in the country, which is very much required today. A few days back, something unique happened in India, and it was there all over the mainstream media and social media. We've always been reading about the 4 pillars of democracy. So let's say judiciary is the 3rd pillar of democracy. So last week, the 3rd pillar of democracy said that the 4th pillar of democracy is not letting me work. The actual sentence used by the Chief Justice of India was, the 4th pillar of democracy is taking democracy back. Now, out of 4 pillars, if 2 pillars are fighting in the public space, we can see what kind of positive discourse we can construct in that background. And this is actually a very serious matter. Let's not trivialize it. It has been trivialized by mainstream media in the last few days. Maybe perhaps the Chief Justice of India is going to retire in a few days from now. so they're not giving that much importance to what he said. But actually, he has raised a very pertinent point. And that also brings me to another aspect that which Mr. Rohit Gandhi also pointed out. Everyone has a very well-defined role. Media has a very well-defined role in our country. Media is there from, in the independence struggle, we have seen the kind of role media has played. And even today, the media has a very well-defined role. And sometimes, asking difficult questions is the prime objective of a journalist. Let's forget about solutions. There are systems in place. There are people in positions who can look for solutions, who can find out solutions. But asking relevant questions at appropriate time, I think that's the basic role of a media practitioner. That's what I think. Since I have only 10 minutes to speak, I would like to very succinctly divide my talk into 3 alphabets. R, T, I. It's not right to information, but R is respect, T is trust, and I is intent. Do we respect our journalists? When I don't come from a journalism background in the academic sense. I never intended to become a journalist. But I finally became a journalist, and in fact, I got the first opportunity of my life to work in Times of India as a journalist in Delhi, and I worked there for 6 years. And it was an eye-opening experience. I learned everything while working. I'm really thankful to the editors I had there. They taught me the basics of journalism there. And we used to respect journalists at that point of time. The kind of TV debates used to happen. We used to eagerly wait that at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, these kind of debates will happen. And the star journalist who used to anchor those debates used to be a moderator, not a participant in those debates. What is happening today is a journalist is a participant in the debate, is not a moderator. I read a joke somewhere on social media. A policeman was standing, barricading a road. A journalist came. He said, I'm a journalist. I want to go inside. The policeman asked, "Kaun si party ke?" This is the level of, and this is not, to some extent, I think this shows the reality. Because the kind of journalism that is being practiced nowadays, I think it needs to introspect on various aspects. Respect to a journalist comes based on the kind of issues a journalist is raising. If you're trivializing issues, no journalist can garner that kind of respect. My focus is not so much on media institutions or media houses, which are really a powerful player in the media landscape, but more so on the individual journalists. Why I'm saying that? Because the landscape has changed drastically in the last 10 years. When I started journalism, one of my editors used to say, if I close my eye and throw a stone in any direction, I'll find 10 reporters there who are willing to work for Times of India. That has changed now. Now, even young journalists passing out from institutions are opening their own media spaces. So a drastic change has happened. That's why my focus is on the role of a journalist. And believe me, you don't need any degree in journalism to be a journalist. I owe a lot of my achievements, if I call them achievements in life or learnings in life, to my college. I studied in Kirodimal College in Delhi University. I was not studying journalism there. Journalism is not a course there. I was studying history there. But my college, my teachers had a tremendous impact on me. And that's how I think I maneuvered and went into journalism also later on. So my focus today is on a journalist, the role of a journalist. So first one is respect. If you're not respecting the journalist, then I think there is a problem. And the journalist can only garner respect, no matter how senior the journalist is, based on the issues that journalist is raising. Second is trust. Do we trust our journalists? Do we trust our news? I'm sorry to say, not 100%, not even 50%, not even 40%. We know there might be some kind of factual errors in the news. We know the fake news is getting peddled every day, not just in social media, but also in mainstream media. Mainstream channels also have their social media outlets who are also using the same kind of jargon, same kind of information, which is not based actually on facts. but nobody is doing anything. Everybody is talking about fact checks, but ultimately nobody is doing it. I remember, I think 10 years back, Hindu was the only newspaper which actually created an editor-level position to look for errors in the newspaper. I don't know whether that is continuing even today or not, but the role of that, and very senior editor, and the role of the editor was to look for factual errors, grammatical errors, any kind of errors that have been published in the newspaper, and a dedicated space was given in the newspaper in the next edition, on the next day, where the editor will highlight those errors in the newspaper with the date and the column that this news was published on this day and these were the errors in that. So this was an editor-level position that was created, maybe 8 to 10 years back. Now we need more fact-checking. Professor Dwivedi in the morning said about news and information. So there is an overflow of information. Every information is not news. Of course, there is a process involved from where the information is transformed into news. And there, fact-checking creates a very important role. I was talking about trust. So till the time we have news where the journalist is confident, when the journalist knows that the news is a real news based on facts, we can't trust the journalist. And that's why what I have seen in the last 7, 8 years, we don't trust news so much. We look for another sources to verify that news. That has been the level of trustworthiness that has come down. I'll give you one example of these elements, respect and trust. I got an opportunity to visit Bastar 8 years back, and after that I have been visiting there quite regularly. And we were traveling from Dantewada to Bijapur. There is a 100-kilometer long highway there, and we had to go to a village there. We were scared because we were going from Delhi for the first time. And the driver was scared because he has not ever gone to those sites. But we had 2 journalists who were accompanying us. They said, "Sir, we have been working here from last 20 years. Nobody is going to harm us." That's the level of respect they command in the community, in both the sides, whether it's on the other side of the border or on this side. That's the kind of respect and trust they had. And when we reached there, these were the journalists who actually knew everybody in the village, and all the villagers could identify them. Even the people who have taken violence, who have resorted to violence, even they respected and trusted them. So that's the kind of trust and respect journalists who are sitting there thousands of kilometers away from here, who are not even getting paid on a monthly basis by any organizations, are getting. So I think respect and trust forms a very basic foundation of a career in journalism. Interestingly, no one said that media is the 4th pillar of democracy. It's the journalists who said, we are the 4th pillar of democracy. Why they said this? Because said it's our social responsibility to ensure all other 3 pillars or 3 institutions are in control. They are doing their work. Nobody came. You come here and we'll tell you that now you are the 4th pillar of democracy. So, no, we are taking this onus on our own. We are taking on this responsibility that we are the 4th pillar of democracy, and we'll ensure that other 3 pillars of democracy or the institutions are working in the way their work has been defined, because they have to be independent. They have to work independently of each other. So if media has taken on that onus, I think then media has to introspect if they want to really foster a constructive public discourse in the contemporary times. The third alphabet, which I wanted to focus, was on intent. Do the journalists have intent to create a positive, constructive public discourse? When we see the mainline debates at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, where the most pressing contemporary issues may be related to the condition of rupee, may be related to the significant decline in the forex reserves of the country, or maybe other socio-economic or health-related issues. Do we see those issues in the primetime debates? Not anymore. So do we have the intent, do the journalists have the intent to create or foster a positive public discourse? I think that also needs to be introspected. So I'll just finish here. I think my time is over. So last point I want to focus on. There are a lot of young people sitting here, and in the morning, Professor Dwivedi was also here. See, here comes the role of institutions like IIMC and colleges and in fact, and community organizations like Buy House. Any of you who wants to become a journalist, I think this is the best and opportune and the most opportune time to become a journalist. But do journalism, the kind of journalism which you want to pursue. Highlight issues which you think are important for the country. Highlight issues which you think will actually foster public discourse, positive public discourse in the country. And this is the easiest time to become a journalist. The only thing is you should have an intent. If you have an intent to become a journalist, I'm not talking about content aggregators. Everybody can create a video and put it online. I'm saying if you have an intent to become a journalist, if you want to really work on the ground, this is the best time to be a journalist. You don't need any big media house to become a journalist in this time. So you can find out your way. And the last comment for the mainstream media, because mainstream media has the biggest responsibility to foster positive public discourse, is that the mainstream media should start listening to the voice of people. Media doesn't have its own voice. It's the voice of the people. They should realize that what they have to do is to raise the voice of people. उससे पहले उन्हें समझना होगा कि लोग क्या कहना चाहते हैं और वो समझ के वो हमारी आवाज़ को और आगे तक बढ़ाएं. This is what I want to say. And I think that will go a long way in fostering public discourse if media understand what the people wants to say, what are the critical issues in the contemporary times, and how and why media should raise those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Narendra, for this, in a sense, for helping us see the implications of this theme for a journalist. In a sense, if we want to think about the role of the media in building, contributing to building a constructive public discourse, the question is, a lot of it comes down to the credibility of the journalist herself or himself. Whether they've been able to, I think that example you shared of Dantewada being, those bonds of trust which are built between the journalist and the people, it just helps bring out the importance of those elements which contribute to credibility. One is a sense that the journalist is a public servant. In a sense, the journalist is an agent of social progress for the people that they are. Like he was saying, the organization has to recognize, journalists need to recognize that they are the voice of the people. And in a sense, gradually that link can get weakened. It can begin to be treated as a profession that's elitist. But then there's also the intent of the journalist, being conscious. I think our keynote speaker also spoke about this. What are the subjects? How seriously does the journalist herself or himself take the role they play? And what vision does that person have for society's progress? A lot of it boils down to that. Friends, we now have, as you can see, tea and snacks are being served around. So we will have, we won't have a break. We will continue the session. But this is the time for you to contribute on this very important theme. We have a very distinguished group of participants, professors. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Avijit Dutt, who is also with us. He's a filmmaker, actor, theater director. And then we also have academics. We have people from distinguished actors from civil society. So please raise your hands if you have a question. And is someone taking the mic around? We'd like to hear from you in your response to the first two, the inaugural speakers, but also mainly for these two speakers. I think we have if you can introduce yourself at the beginning and then share your comment or question.
Sir, I'm Abhijit Dutt. Besides being an actor, I've also been teaching for 2.5 decades at IIMC. And I was shocked, unfortunately Mr. Dwivedi is not here, so it's not fair totally. I was shocked to see the head of an institution of communication deriding the social media. It is something which is a given. It has had its own growth. And I think this is the time when we need to do introspection like our two speakers right now have, which is to look and see what are we doing with the media. Are we only going to be a reflection of views of the government? Because I believe, as most right-thinking people do, that the first task of a patriotic journalist is to control your government, to save your country. Thank you, sir. It's only a...
Thank you so much. Can we take one more question and then we'll... Yes, just... Can take one or two more.
Yes, I'm Manish Sharma.
Yes.
So basically, I was a journalist, So my basic question is that there's a lot of people are lacking motivation with journalism simply because that there are a lot of it has been monopolized by the big corporate houses. Today, a lot of big corporate houses, for example, Ambani, etc. Big tech, even in US, big tech is basically controlling these. For example, Facebook, etc. They are trying to control the voice of the people, as such. So which is why, because the main issues are getting stifled, So that is why the entire profession is getting impacted, Today there is no confidence in that. So assuming that the Prime Minister says something, on that he was the biggest Prime Minister simply because, in the previous Prime Minister accomplished nothing, or he inaugurates an infrastructure project which is basically no one has developed, no one, cross-checks, fact checks that, because these media houses are massively dependent on the government funding. So previously they used to be a lot more independent because a lot of competency, expertise used to be required. Today it's simply that the government funding and these big tech and for example even the point that previously were raised in this panel discussion that social media is nothing but social media is also getting completely monopolized and because the government is investing massively on the social media to stifle the voices of the people, masses. Look at the farmers' agitation. The facts could not come out. Had it been in some of the previous governments, definitely it would have been a much more bigger issue. But simply because that the government is investing massively to control the social media regulated. So that is why that the media is not getting is used here. Thanks very much.
So one more question we can take. Maybe the mic if you can, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I've been a part of organizing this, thing, but I was a little worried and little alarmed with what Professor Dwivedi said in the morning, more so because he said it so well. The point is, there was no compassion for the victim. We have to see this in a much larger context of how these mobiles are coming to us. We are doing 5G, there will be more mobiles. There's a whole international thing about selling, software, hardware. There's a whole technology in which I am involved in. I have not done the technology has come over me, taken over me. And I know how much of a victim I am of that and how I've been, it's, like, do I have any option other than taking Pepsi or, something? So, the product that is being given to me and which I'm asked to consume without any, and even my critical faculties are being taken over without my knowledge. So I think we need to discuss it at a much larger, it's not just national India, but at a much, much larger level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So before we'll take more questions, but I think we should, to be fair to our panelists, we should give them, time to respond first to these three questions. So the big tech, the business models, the state controlling media, and do we really have a choice? You see, there was a famous media theorist who said that you may not watch television, but television has changed your world. So then your choice is superficial. Is it really a choice to opt out of this?
So I think there is a piece that is missing in our landscape, and that's a very important piece of the way it is. So we had an establishment of the Press Council of India in the early 1950s, I think 1952. The Press Council's job was the check and balance on the media. Now what happened was it only applied to newspapers. And they created a toothless body of the Press Council of India. Anywhere else in the world, media checks on itself through two processes. First is a ombudsman inside the media house where the filtration happens, where you can approach a ombudsman, the discussion will be public on the complaint, and the solution is public against a journalist or the media organization itself. And the ombudsman is usually a very senior person from any industry which could be appointed by a media house. The next layer is the judiciary. That if you have not reached your answer through the ombudsman, then you reach the judicial level, and judiciary kind of decides if the journalist or the media house is wronged. Now both those layers, for at least in this democracy, are missing. The Broadcasters Association is a self-appointed body, just a coterie of people close to the government. And some of you mentioned, the news channels, the media is not bought. It's the corporate house which is bought. The corporate house, most media channels are running in losses, most of them. I don't know if you've seen anybody's books. I have, because I ran some of them. They're literally on the edge. Many of them siphon money from the main company to just even come 1 crore or 2 crores in profit. I probably pay more tax than a large media house which 1,000 crore turnover. So you can get to the point to understand that there is a huge challenge the way it's structured, and I think setting those those checks and balance standards is going to be a very important part, and us not discussing them and it not being part of our landscape is a problem area. And I think once we have some of those checks and balances in place, we will have less challenges with it. But it is a very important part. You as the public, you as the people out there also have to raise it as much as the journalists have to.
Okay, so we maybe take 2 more questions before we move on to the next. Yes, sir, over here. 1 and madam. 1 minute, sir. Mic आपको नहीं आपको पहले की बात है प्लीज
मेरा सवाल मिस्टर रोहित से है. He said that in 1993 he was describing the situation of a journalist at that time. I would like to ask him, what has changed really that has compromised everything in our news, in the views of the journalist? And I personally feel that the journalists are not any more brave. One has to be very brave to be a good journalist. Because if you are not brave to tell the truth, then like when I listen to the news, after listening it for some time, I feel I don't know what is the truth here. 2 people are saying, Pablo Neruda has written very well, yesterday the truth died, an unlikely death. Nobody has wept over it. Nobody has sent flowers to it. But before it is too late, let us find out who has killed the truth. You, I, or all of us. So this is the time to find out where lies the truth. If journalism is anything that can really do something to the society, it is not to build our opinions. Our opinions should remain our own. We all have our opinion, our identity, our thought. And I don't like when I read in newspapers that there are opinion makers in newspapers in places like that. Why should we all are free? We all have our ideas. We are educated. Our kids are growing up and they need to have their own views. So I don't agree with that. The only thing I feel is that somewhere in the news, it is not just fake news or paid news or any news. It is the news which is not truthful at all, not brave, not what it should be. Thank you.
Okay, I'm H.L. Nashil from Ramanujan College, Department of Commerce. I'll just ask specific questions. I'll make it very short, simple. And I hope majority of the participants are students. So we are getting confused because newspapers are flooded in the market. You know, I do not know what type of TV channels should I watch to get the real news or the truth. It doesn't sometimes depend upon the number of viewers. So I'd like, the panelist or whoever, if you could suggest us at least some 3 newspapers and 3 television channels. Apart from that, you can just include even the 3 sports channels. Thank you.
I think that will be a little controversial. But I don't know if anyone has... Yes, one from the question from there. It's good to see our young student participants also sharing their comments. Maybe we can take 2 from the students, friends who are here. Comments or questions?
First of all, good afternoon to all of you, sir. Sir, with respect, my question to all the panelists, I would like to ask questions regarding section 124A of the IPC. Sir, we are evidencing a situation where media freedom and their rights are severely curtailed by not only political but institutionalized mechanism as well. Also, in current scenario, section 124A has become a tool for state arbitrary attack on media expressions as well as on media thought. How media should act on this matter of section 124A, although the matter is sub judice in the court of law, whether it is the high time to abolish this draconian law? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, sir, my question is basically from Rohit, sir, that you were talking about that women are suppressed and they should be talked about, but I would like to keep a point of mind that talking about women is fair, but isn't it unfair that we don't take up the topic of LGBTQ community? Like, isn't it unfair for that community because they too need society's support to just come up and show up that what they're having for the country and what they can just showcase. So isn't it a point to be considered?
There's one lady there, yeah. I think that, and then we'll take comments and then move on. It's exciting to see younger participants.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, Rohit sir said that we are media is the 4th pillar and we should intervene. So I think we should not intervene on introspect in such a manner that it is you are doing their work. Like our CGI also said that media is somewhere weakening the democracy and it is hampering the judiciary system. So don't you think that we should decide the responsibilities and we should decide the jurisdiction of the media? And secondly, I want to say that nowadays what media is doing is, it is showing one side of the story more. It is concentrating on one side of the story more because somewhere it is benefiting them, views being the center point as we have seen earlier. So, and I think YouTubers are more neutral nowadays. So why is it that happening? Why media is more concentrating on one side of the story?
Okay, so hold on to your comments and questions. We'll come back after the two speakers. But before that, I'd like to invite our speakers if you'd like to comment on the three questions that were raised.
So there was one question about the law. See, when the Britishers were ruling India, and when the mass media, particularly the print media, because that was the most prolific and powerful medium at that time, started raising questions, started raising issues which were not comfortable to the British rulers, they brought in several laws. Unfortunately, most of those laws in different forms are still continuing in the country. And it's more unfortunate also because neither the media organizations, Mr. Gandhi recently mentioned about the Press Council of India and other institutions which are there to create and put media in credible control to ensure that media doesn't deviate what they're supposed to do, and also raise issues which concern the media. So unfortunately, neither the organizations which are working to support the media ecosystem in the country or any government has taken any view or any step forward to abolish any of these laws. So if no one is actually serious about changing these laws or abolishing these laws, so they're going to continue for another 100 years. Because it's only just we have some selective cases coming to us that we write about it and we get to know about it. Otherwise, we don't even get to know about that these are the laws or these are the limitations that are there legally in front of the journalists who are working in the field. So that is one. So there has to be some pressure, some force from somewhere to abolish these laws. Our seminars, because they won't have that kind of impact as far as the law making or law changing ability or the processes of the country is concerned. So there has to be a real force at least from the media community to at least work on this. And probably Mr. Gandhi will also add to it further. So that is my take on it. Secondly, somebody talk about the jurisdiction of media. Now, jurisdiction is already well defined. Jurisdiction of all the four pillars is already well defined. The problem is that nobody is accepting their own borders. Everybody is trying to overlap. A journalist who is a star anchor thinks that he or she is the decision maker. The entire onus of the country is in the shoulder of that 8 p.m. anchor. You know, a lot of senior journalists and anchors who are close to the ministers or the power centers, they also get that feeling that they also become powerful. But the reality is not. And if any journalist is thinking that they have become politically powerful, they are living in their own world, and they're also misleading the country because the show that they are anchoring has a lot of impact on the audience. So don't go into those things. You know, the jurisdiction of all the four pillars, whether it is executive, whether it's legislature, or the judiciary, or the media, is very well defined. We need to respect those, independence of these four institutions, of these pillars. And this is something which is not my view, this is something which the Constitution is saying, The pillars are independent. They have to work independent, and that's the kind of a check and balance that the Constitution has created. So this is not something new that we are talking about. It's there from it's 75 years of independence this year. But nobody has actually worked on those principles that were given in the Constitution. Thirdly, one-sided theory. Of course, there is a term that has often been used in media circles, especially in the broadcast media, agenda setting. That 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. shows have agenda setting power in the country. They set the agenda, what needs to be. And to some extent it's true also. Because print media, unfortunately, in the last few years have become more and more dependent on television media and social media to get their news. So to some extent it's true. But now with social media proliferating, and I won't put the blame on social media. I don't want to put social media completely in a negative, stance. Social media has democratized the media space a lot. It has in fact democratized the news space also. A lot of news which any television channel or any print media outlet won't even dare to touch are actually debated and discussed on social media platforms publicly. And that is also a very powerful way of bringing news into the public discourse. So we can't brush aside the social media. Of course, there are limitations, there are problems with social media, and they will be there. But there is a very strong positive aspect and the positive role that social media has been playing. Earlier we used to say, who is your favorite anchor? Who is your favorite journalist? Now we also say, who is your favorite YouTuber? Which YouTube channel you are watching regularly? And that brings me to your answer, sir. Why do you want to watch television channels? Your first screen, in fact, our first screen is now this. Television is now second or third screen. When we get bored with this or we get fed up with this, we switch on the television. So my advice is don't watch television channels. You will be at peace. Thank you.
I can answer to the two things that were raised. One, ma'am, you talked about they lack bravery today. I think they're not brave, they're brave. They're just compromised. That's the only problem. If they were not compromised, they would still raise it with as loud a way they actually side with it. And I think that's where the challenge areas are. The owners of these organizations are bought, then the journalists are hired based on those corporate heads that this is what you need to go out and do. You have to protect these people. These are the stories you need to file, or you'll get a call and say, change the news for today. So I think that's where the problem is. And that relationship between money and editorial needs to be divided. It needs to be cut. Most countries, most advanced countries are able to quickly, cut that slice properly. There is a way around it. It's not impossible, but it needs to be done. Another person raised the issue of LGBTQ. When I described women, I just looked at one of the largest group of people who've been sidelined in a very systematic manner over the centuries. So that's why I raised it. I'm not saying LGBTQ is not, or there are other smaller communities who are not. I'm saying the identification of people who are set aside needs to be isolated, and it's going to be a thoughtful process around it. It cannot be off the cuff. Today I'm doing this story, tomorrow I'm doing another story. I am, but at the same time I must focus on some of those issues to be able to bring, for example, I take up child rights as one of the big areas, or environment as one of the big areas, and consider the environment not being a human being or an individual, but an issue which needs to be addressed. So I think it's about having a more thoughtful process around what you need to do to address and have a better society to live in.
Thank you so much to our speakers and participants for